Can I ask if everyone would take their seat? Oh, that everybody got quiet so quickly. And hopefully you have one. Yeah, thank you, Scott.
We apologize for that.
Welcome, everyone, to the Consumer Advisory Committee. I am so pleased to see everybody around this table, and I want to welcome returning members and new members to this Consumer Advisory Committee. It is so great. I'm sure that all of you recognize the fact that the importance of this committee and the work that we have ahead of us and the exciting issues that we will be addressing over the course of our term. So thank you all for the time that you will devote to this process, both here to the meetings that we have during the year and to the working groups. And thank you all. And I know Scott and I are both overwhelmed with your volunteering for the working groups, anywhere from 1 to 4 working groups. We'll be talking about those later today and talking about how the working groups work and the time that you will need to devote to those. I know there have been a number of questions. We'll take those on later today. So thank you again for being here. We'll be talking about the agenda and the logistics for today in just a little bit. But I think the most important thing that we need to do first is to introduce ourselves to each other. We have a number of returning members from our last Consumer Advisory Committee, and we have a number of new members, which is wonderful. So we have some new experience to add to the mix and a lot of great experience of working with the committee in this room. So without further ado, let's go around the room, and I will start. I'm Debbie Berlin. I'm representing the National Consumers League, and I serve as chair of the Consumer Advisory Committee. And for those of you new to the room, in order to get the attention of the room over there, which controls the microphones and the recording system, you need to raise your hand to speak so that they turn the mics on that are in front of you. So before you speak, make sure that you raise your hand. They'll turn on the mic. So thank you. We'll go around this way.
Good morning. Ann Berkowitz with Verizon.
I'm Stephanie Pody with the National Cable and Telecommunications Association.
And before we continue, if there's anything you want to add as you go around the room, if you want to say whether you're new to the Consumer Advisory Committee or you are a returning member that might be of interest to the group, whether your organization is returning but you are new, that might be of interest to the group. So why don't we start over, because that might be of interest to the organization. So and anything else you want to say, we've got a little bit of time. Let me just also say that we are expecting Chairman Wheeler at around 9:30. So that's our next item on the agenda. So so that's how much time we have for these introductions. So we have a little bit of time if you want to just let us know and inform the group about anything.
Or issues that concern you.
Or anything you want to throw in there. So there you go. This is not a quickie introduction. This is our opportunity to get to know each other. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do this again. Apparently I've learned now. Ann Berkowitz with Verizon. Verizon is not new to the Consumer Advisory Committee, but I am. This is my first time sitting here, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to go on with that.
Thank you, Ann.
Stephanie Pody again with NCTA, and we are a returning organization on the CAC, and I am a returning representative. We look forward to working with everybody.
Good morning. My name is Yejin Jing. I'm from the National Association of Counties, and we're new to the CAC.
Hi, I'm.
Can we anticipate this?
I think you're okay.
Hi, I'm Lauren Wilson from Free Press, and we are new to the committee.
Hi, I'm Barry Umansky with the Digital Policy Institute, and this is my third renewal on the CAC, and my alternate, Bob Yaden, is also in the room, and it's good to be back. Thanks, Debbie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Reynolds from the Consumer Electronics Association, sitting in for Julie Carney, who's on a well-deserved vacation right now. This is our 6th term, I think, on the CAC, and my 2nd time serving as the alternate.
And let me just take this opportunity to thank CEA, Alex and Julie, for the breakfast and treats that you are all participating in and munching on this morning, and for the lunch that we will have today. We appreciate the sponsorship that you have provided us with today. So thank you, CEA.
Our pleasure.
I'm Debbie Goldman with the Communication Workers of America. This is my first time on the committee. Deborah said to me that we've been on before, but not in my memory. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenneth Mallory, and I'm with the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. And I've lost count of how many times we've been a part of the committee, but this is my 2nd time here.
Todd O'Boyle, Common Cause, first time on the CAC.
Hi, I'm Melissa Newman at CenturyLink. I think this is CenturyLink's first time on this committee, and it's therefore my first time on the committee.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Sassaman. I am representing the Center for Media Justice, which has been on the committee before, and we're a member organization of the Center for Media Justice. I'm the policy director at a group called Media Mobilizing Project.
Hi, I'm Chris Calabrese from the Center for Democracy and Technology, and I didn't check before I came, but as far as I know, this is our first time on the committee, but we're very excited, especially with the renewed focus on privacy issues. Thank you.
Before I start.
Hi, I'm Chris Baker with AARP, and we've served numerous times on the advisory committee, and you might think that might get me a better seat than the corner seat, but I'm willing to take it.
Chris, you're directly across.
That's right.
Oh, power seat.
Good morning. My name is Christina Gagne. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Trail. We're a digital literacy education technology company.
And you're new.
And I'm new.
Don't hold it against her. I'm Shirley Rooker. I'm actually the first chair of this group. I think I have the distinction of Debbie and I and Scott. We've definitely been here since the beginning. So it's nice to see the group still thriving. I head up Call for Action, which is a consumer group affiliated with radio, television, and newspapers.
I know I have to be a little taller. So Shirley beat me to it. I was going to recognize Shirley as the first chair of the Consumer Advisory Committee. Even before it was called the Consumer Advisory Committee, I believe it had a slightly different name at that time when you were the first chair. But she served for several terms and paved the way to make my job a lot easier, I know. So it's great to have Shirley around the table, and thank you for all you've done in your role. So I'm so glad to have you here today, Shirley. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amina Fazlullah. I'm Director of Policy of the Benton Foundation, and I think Benton Foundation has been a part of the CAC for a number of years now. I don't know exactly the number, but I know it's more than 3.
Can I? Oh, wait. I love to add to things. So I would like to recognize the Benton Foundation, and I know several others around the table might want to do that as well. Benton Foundation has been a member of the Consumer Advisory Committee for many terms. 2005. Since 2000. Scott's memory is unbelievable. But not only that, the founder and chair of the Benton Foundation, Charles Benton, did participate, was a CAC member, and not only that, did amazing things, and unfortunately passed away just a short while ago, a couple months ago, I think it was, and I know that was very sad news for many of us around the table, so I just wanted to not only recognize Benton Foundation, but Charles Benton himself, and we want to do more than just recognize him, but I just wanted to mention that all that he did for consumers throughout his life, and also for the CAC. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie McAuliffe. I'm with Americans for Tax Reform. More specifically, I'm with Digital Liberty, and this is our first time as part of the council.
I'm Jeffrey Manny. I'm with the International Center for Law and Economics. This is our first time here, and delighted to be here all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's nicer there in every way.
Yeah. Ooh. What do I say about that? Hi, I'm Vicki Phillips. I'm here representing American University's program on information justice and intellectual property, which is, and I direct the IP clinic there, and I'm here, I guess, to represent sort of this growing community of IP tech clinics across the country who are engaging in these issues and trying to extend the capacity of a lot of NGOs in this area. And I'm happy to be back here. The last time I was here, I was on the staff wrestling with difficult items like the first video description item and the personal attack and political editorial rules. So I like difficult issues for those who remember those days. Thanks.
And I'm Steve Posiosk. I'm with the American Consumer Institute. Third time for the organization and third time for myself. So welcome, everyone.
My name is Tom Dowling, and I am representing the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Consumer Advocacy Network, DHH CAN. We have 12 members and partner organizations with us. I'm here on behalf of Claude Stout today, who's out of town. It's my first time joining the group this morning. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Louise Lanchetti. I'm here on behalf of T-Mobile, and I have served proudly on the committee for several times. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jocelyn Day. I'm from the Massachusetts Department of Telecommunications and Cable. That's a mouthful, I know. We're a state regulatory agency, and this is my first time on the committee.
Hello. All right, my name is Lorenzo Williams. I'm representing the Consumer Federation of America on behalf of Dr. Irene Leach. This is my first time. I'm unsure of the history of our organization with this group, but I'm excited to be here.
Hi, Mark DeFalco with the Appalachian Regional Commission. We're a long-term member, and we like to think that we bring the rural focus to a lot of the discussions.
Hi, I'm Eve Anderson from Google, and this is our first time here. I lead accessibility engineering, and I'm an engineer myself.
Hi, I'm Laura Moy. I'm with New America's Open Technology Institute. This is my first time on the committee, and as far as I know, it's New America's first time on the committee. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Squatto. I'm from the National Hispanic Media Coalition. We've served on other committees, the Open Internet Advisory Committee and the Diversity Advisory Committee, but first time on the Consumer Advisory Committee for the organization and for myself, so we get to X off another spot on the bingo board. Maybe we'll get there soon.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Morris, and I'm representing the American Indian Policy Institute at Arizona State University. I am a returning member, but my organization affiliation is changed, and I represent tribal interests, Native American interests, and I do a lot of work with the National Congress of American Indians, who actually informs what I do.
We still have some. Hi, Olivia Wine, National Consumer Law Center, and returning member, and my focus is on from the low-income consumer perspective.
Hi, I'm Paul Schrader with the American Foundation for the Blind. I think we've been on 4, the first one and then these last 3 sessions. And Vicki, thanks for all that work on video description back in the old days. And of course, now you'll be pleased to know that blind people have access to Newton Minnow's TV Wasteland just like everybody else. So we can have our minds shut down too, but at least we can enjoy it.
Yes, it's called equal mindlessness. It's Scott Marshall, and welcome. I have always enjoyed working with this committee in I'm going on my 15th year of working with the Consumer Advisory Committee. And you guys have been terrific and have always engaged and inspired me. And we're getting better and better, I think, as we get older. I hope. In any event, we'll talk more about logistics in a bit. I was sitting out where you are many times in my prior career. I used to serve on a lot of consumer advisory committees, and I guess that's why they hired me here at the Commission back in 2000 to start this one. Thanks.
Well, all I can say is that was a fabulous decision that the FCC made back in, Mutual Admiration Society. But no, we could not do this without Scott. He is instrumental in making this CAC work well. So there is no way that this could happen without Scott. He is, well, you will know, he is great. So that is what I want to say. Now, having gone around and heard everybody introduce themselves and heard all these names of organizations, I just want to ask if anyone has any questions about anyone's organization. I know I'm very confused about this group called Google. I don't know, just wondering what that is. But does anyone have any questions you would like to say? Who are you? I didn't understand. Yes, Shirley, of course.
Debbie, it's Ann Boback from NAB. I just want to know, first of all, to say thank you for having us return. I think this is my 5th tour of duty, and there may be other people on the phone as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ann, for that important reminder. Scott gives me notes. I don't look at them. Yes, we have some people on the phone, and let's go to the phones, and please speak up and remind me to continually check on the phone. We forget on the phone. We don't have a phone. Got to understand, we have a space here, but we have no phone. So yes, people on the phone, please introduce yourselves to us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Art Neal from New Media Rights. This is the 3rd time that I've been involved with the committee, and I just want to say hello and to all my colleagues that are returning, and also welcome to all the new members.
Thank you, Art. I know you're up very early. You're in California, so thank you for joining us.
That's right. I'm out here in San Diego, yes. This is Mishka Herrera from Montgomery County, Maryland. This is my 3rd term on the CAC. This year, I have the membership is in the name of NATOA, the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. And I want to welcome in the room is Rick Elrod, who is sitting in the audience with the blue shirt, if he would just wave his hand. And we are pleased to be back.
Welcome, Mitzi, and we look forward to seeing you in person next time. And want to introduce yourself again, Ann, because your introduction was too brief. Go ahead. Ann Boback. National Association of Broadcasters. Well, Ann was the first person who spoke, Ann Boback from National Association of Broadcasters. So, okay. Shirley.
I just wanted to add, you're thanking Scott, and I say amen to that. He's wonderful. But so are the other people here. Jeff, who makes our microphones and things work, and Brittany. I bet he's not here today. I'm sorry I missed her.
Yes.
But all the support staff at the FCC have just been wonderful through the years of this committee.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Very, very good.
Thank you, Shirley. I'm going to turn this over to Scott in just a minute. Let me just tell you about one other process for the meeting going forward. With such a large group, when we get into discussion, questions for any of our speakers, one way of managing that is if you could, when you have a question, you want to make a point, if you could raise your card like this, your tent card, that will help me manage the discussion. Now, one thing I can tell you is the names on here are really small. My eyes are not that good. So it may require a little help with recognizing your names, but I will try as best I can. But that's my request. If you could put your tent card up like that if you want to make a point or ask a question.
There you go.
Okay, Scott, you're on.
Oh, my eyes aren't so good either. Maybe we should do RFID chips or something. Even large print probably wouldn't work. But anyway, I always have the task of, especially for the new folks, to tell you where the restroom is. We actually have a break in the morning, which we don't really have in the afternoon this time around. But anyway, it's straight out the door to my right here. Go straight down the corridor, and at the intersecting hall to your left, as if you were going back out to the 12th Street Guard Station, the restrooms are along that corridor. And Brittany has been fantastic. I don't know if she's still in the room, but she's pinched hit for me for the last few days when Betty had a family matter that she had to take care of, and so we've tried to put it all together. If you need anything, certainly ask her or me, and we'll try to do everything we can to make it happen. This meeting is a little different than usual. We have a little more time for the working groups this afternoon, and we'll talk more about that later. But as Debbie indicated, really the real work of this committee happens in those working groups between meetings of this committee. You're going to be hearing about the Consumer Disclosure OIO working group that's already been meeting for a couple of meetings now, and about that task that we have that's due at the end of October to the Commission, a recommendation on the disclosure vehicle. But that's coming later too. But I'm here to support the working groups as best we can, both if you want to do in-person meetings or frequently and usually it's done by teleconference. Anything else at this point, Debbie?
I don't think so. We are in the waiting game now for the chairman.
Okay.
It's 9:30.
All right. Sometimes they get delayed, and I imagine this is going to be a busy day for him, don't you think?
It's a busy day.
Sure.
Well, we're 9 hours into this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Should we talk a little more about the working groups, maybe?
Is that I mean, we could certainly do that. We could share this mic. Should we get another mic over?
No, sure.
Yeah, here. Hand me your mic.
My mother told me about sharing. Okay. All right. There you go. We're going to have, starting at 1:30 this afternoon, 3 working group breakout sessions so that those of you who have expressed interest in multiple groups might be able to try out, test the waters of different groups today. And we thought that would be a good way to start out the groups to try to get that cross-fertilization going, those ideas started. And the purpose of the whole exercise this afternoon is to identify issues and to get you to get more acquainted with how we process information and how we process recommendations at the committee.
Yeah.
You want
Sure.
to talk about the structure?
So we'll talk a little bit more about this in the afternoon.
Yep.
I believe the working group rosters they're in your packet. So you'll see that there were some that are very large,
Yep.
and others that are a little smaller. So for today, we've decided to pair them up in such a way that the large group meets at the same time as the smaller group, to try as much as we could to try and avoid too much overlap between the groups. And that would hopefully give most of you an opportunity to attend at least the one or two priority groups that you signed up for. And we've afforded enough time. We will see where we are scheduling-wise, but the way we've done this, that each working group would have at least a half hour, possibly more, to meet today. And to address some of the questions that came up during the sign-up period, as those of you who have done this before, the large majority of the work of the working groups is done not during these meetings. It's done between these meetings. So having conflicts today is not that big a deal. So if you can't attend a working group today, that's really not all that big a deal. You won't miss that much. So as long as you can participate in the calls between the working group sessions today and the next meeting that we have, that's what's important. That's really where the work gets done. It's nice to have the face-to-face meeting today to get to know each other and to start the process, but it's really those in-between meetings that are important. That's where the work gets done. You can do as many working groups as you can handle, and we want you to participate in at least one. That's part of your obligation of serving on the CAC. And I believe everybody has signed up for at least one working group. So congratulations to everybody on the CAC, and thank you for that. Working groups are also, open to others in your organization to participate in if they so desire. And that's another important thing to keep in mind, is that if you want to bring in a colleague to participate in a working group, you can certainly do that. If there's an expertise that someone has on your staff, that's helpful. That will be helpful to you in the process. You can do that as well. We can talk more about and take your questions on working groups, but while we have the time right now, I want to see if there are any initial questions about the working group process, because there were a number that came up. Let me also just say that we think we came up with 6 good topics for the working groups, but maybe we didn't, and we are absolutely open to playing with those topics. When we thought about consolidating them, that became difficult. We couldn't quite come up with how those could be consolidated, and so that was an issue. Especially with the large numbers we have in most of the working groups. So that was also a consideration, is how do we take, an IP transition group, which has such a large number, and consolidate that with broadband issues, which has such a large number. So the idea of consolidation was difficult. Media, which has very small numbers, is a very, has some unique issues to it. So how do you consolidate that with another working group? So you can see our dilemma. But if we're missing something, if there's an issue that you see as critically important that we have missed, that's something that we might need to consider. We do have the Consumer Protection Working Group, which really can encompass a number of consumer issues. So if there's, you're thinking, there's a really important consumer issue, I don't see it in these working groups. It might fit in that working group, for example. So that's something to think about. Think about that this morning. We can talk about that this afternoon. So right now I can stop while we're in this waiting time period and see if anyone has any questions about these working groups. And use your cards. Set an example. Louisa.
One quick question. You said there'll be breakup on a consolidated basis this afternoon where you have so people can, or you'll have each group have its own time frame for working this
Each
afternoon?
group will have its own time.
Okay.
So we've paired them. So I'm looking. So for example, I think the first two pairs are broadband and media, correct? So those two groups will meet at the same time. So the broadband group will meet and the media working group will meet. If you signed up for both of those, you'll have to make a decision as to which one you attend. But those were the two. That was the largest working group and the smallest working group. So it has the least opportunity for conflict there. So those two groups will meet at the same time. And then there's the next session has a pairing as well, where we took the next largest and the next smallest and paired them together.
And we'll have a document with the room locations and those pairings for 3 sessions during the working group breakouts, all of about a half an hour each. So you'll know where to go if you have a particular interest.
Mark?
You've already addressed this.
Wait for the mic, yeah.
I think, hello? We're going? Okay,
Now
there
you're
you go.
on.
I think you've already mentioned this, Deb, but by my count, we have 14 of the 19 members on the IP transition group are in the broadband group. And I think most of the issues that these groups would be dealing with are going to be very interrelated. So maybe it makes sense to combine those groups into one.
That's a very, very good point. So that is true. However, all the issues that the broadband group will address are not only IP transition issues. So flip it the other way.
Looking at it the other way, there's, of the 25 members on the broadband group, 14 are on the IP group.
So you're saying the broadband group, you could eliminate the IP transition group, is what you're saying?
I'm just saying that I think you could put the two together because the vast majority of the participants are on both groups.
Yeah.
I think
Can you identify yourself?
This is Michael Scrotto from the National Hispanic Media Coalition. So my issue is that, similar to that, right, the broadband is such an overarching kind of umbrella, right?
Yeah.
It would have aspects of universal service, it will have aspects of IP
Right.
transition, it will have aspects of consumer protection. So I guess what I'm curious about is what more do you expect from the broadband group? Like, what are the expectations of the broadband group
Good question.
beyond those topics?
That's a good question. I think that I turn to all of you. If there are no issues outside of the other issues, I mean, that is a good question.
Keep in mind, and you returning members already know this, but the agenda for this committee is largely driven by this committee. We occasionally and welcome specific requests from the Bureau about a recommendation they would like to have from us about this topic or the other topic. We've done many of them. The complaint process being a big one, for example.
But I'd like to hear I would actually like. I would like to hear the CAC respond to that because
Okay.
I mean, it's your working group, so I'd like to hear whether there are any issues outside of those, and we will have to address that later. we have Commissioner Pai has
Excellent.
joined us. So we can, those of you who had questions, we have time on our agenda to take that up later. But good question. So,
I'm sorry? Chairman Trudeau. Card for him.
we do. We'll take off the wheel.
Hey, thanks. Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you again.
Hey, how are you doing? Good.
Thank you.
I'm on.
You're on.
Oh, all right.
You're always on, sir.
No. Depends on who you ask.
Wow. We are, am I on? I think I'm on. I'm on, and then you're on. We are so pleased that one of the, we have, Commissioner, we have 16 new members of this committee. This is our first meeting of our rechartered Consumer Advisory Committee. We have many returning members around the table. We have 16 new members here. And one of the first things we do at our meetings is we hear from some of the commissioners, and we are so pleased, so pleased to have you join us at our first meeting. So thank you so much, Commissioner Pai.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I really appreciate your leadership of the committee these many years. Look forward to working with you and all of the members of the committee, including the newly appointed ones. Also, thanks to our own Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. They, as you know, just do fantastic work. They really are the face of the Commission to the vast majority of the country, and we're so fortunate to have their service to the Commission and, quite honestly, to the country. And welcome in particular to our new chief, Allison Cutler, who I've had the pleasure to meet, and on everything from consumer protection issues to restaurant recommendations in Omaha. She is a go-to resource, let me tell you. I just thought I'd say a couple of words as I'm the warm-up act for the chairman, so don't expect a lot of good material. The good material is about to come when he arrives, but just about who I am and why I care about these issues. I'm from a small town in Kansas called Parsons, which is 10,000 people nestled in the southeast corner of the state, near the borders of Oklahoma and Missouri. And if you were to drive there, you would have to, from here, you'd have to fly 3 hours to Kansas City, then drive 3.5 hours south. It's really, for most people, considered out in the middle of nowhere. And I say that because whenever I go home, a lot of the people I grew up with ask how things are going, and I tell them what I do, and they say, wow, it would be so nice to be in a big city where you can get all of these communications technologies that we just don't get. When I might talk to my parents over Skype, it's frequently interrupted because they are still on essentially dial-up. Sometimes when I call them, the call just drops because call completion is a problem. It all came home to me when I met recently with a man named Pat Gosch, who founded a cable network called RFD TV. It's the only programming network in America that is focused on a positive message for rural Americans. And he said something to me when I met with him, which is sort of telling. And he said, rural consumers just take for granted that they're not going to get the same kinds of representation in the communications landscape as people in urban America. And part of the reason why I was inspired to start this network was to try to bridge that gap. And it occurred to me that's something that the FCC, too, should try to focus on as well. And this is where you guys come in. I know you have a lot of important tasks on your plate. I would just make a pitch to include a particular focus on rural Americans. I can tell you that it would make a really big difference because on area after area, folks in rural America feel the brunt of, either regulatory neglect or the fact that the communications landscape doesn't represent them. They feel it when it comes, for example, to the rate floor, which was adopted as part of the 2011 Universal Service Transformation Order, essentially requiring telephone companies to increase their rates to rural Americans as a condition of those carriers getting universal service support. They feel it when it comes to rural call completion. As I mentioned, when I call home, sometimes those calls drop. That's something that rural Americans uniquely face, and we've taken for granted that these networks should work after 100-some years. But in rural America, there's all too often a problem because of the way IP networks are structured. They feel it when it comes to things like on the media side, AM radio, the fact that it's been a generation since the FCC looked at its rules to revitalize AM radio. In a lot of places, I've been in a town of 60 people called Fort Yukon, Alaska, where they would laugh at you if you asked them about fiber to the premises or fiber to the hut. They would smile if you asked them, well, why don't you get a satellite connection? But they would nod knowingly if you said, oh, do you listen to KZPA, the AM radio station there? And when I told them about our AM revitalization efforts, they just lit up and said, wow, how great it would be if we could get a better AM signal up here in Fort Yukon. So anyway, on all these different areas, there's so many things that I hope you consider when it comes to making the value proposition of communications worthwhile for rural Americans. And with that, I don't want to take any more time than I should. The main attraction is here. And Eddie's getting caffeinated, so watch out. So, but anyway, if we can ever be of assistance, we, the royal we and the plural we, just get in touch with us. My email address is ajit.pi@fcc.gov. You can also find me on Twitter at ajitpifcc. If you have particular issues that are animating you that you think the FCC needs to know about, please do let us know. It's also a pleasure to see some familiar faces, including my law school classmate, Jeff Manny, who somehow snuck onto the panel. So, with that, I will turn it over to our chair and to our chairman.
Getting the chairman a cup of coffee.
We had to get the chairman coffee.
So we need bean neutrality, I think.
Bean neutrality. There you go.
Commissioner, how are you? Good. Quick, take that down. I don't want confusion here.
Yeah, I think there's that fear, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Pai. That was too short. We would love to see you here longer, but we don't want to hold up the chairman's schedule. Thank you, Chairman, for coming. Goodness gracious, it's a busy day, isn't it?
It's been an interesting morning.
An interesting morning. Well, thank you for fitting us into your schedule. And shall we say this is a man who needs no introduction?
Except that he can't work the coffee dispenser.
No,
but other than that,
was not fair. Did you get enough?
I got enough. It's
okay.
cool.
Okay. Chairman, this is your committee. Thank you so much for putting this committee together. We have a number of returning members of this committee, and then we have 16 new members, and we have some wonderful expertise in this room, wonderful new energy in this room, and we all know we have a tremendous number of great consumer issues to address. We look forward to rolling up our sleeves and getting started, and in fact, we already have gotten started. Even before we entered this room today, we've been working as a task force on the consumer disclosures for the OIO that were in the order. So we've been starting on that already. We're very excited about getting to work on so many consumer issues, and we're thrilled to have you here this morning. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for making time on your schedule.
Well, thanks, Deborah, and thank you to all of you. Before I was fortunate enough to end up in this job, I was the chairman of a similar group, the Technological Advisory Committee to the Commission. And so I understand, I think more than most, what you have been asked to do. And I'd like to just share with you a couple of thoughts about doing that. We used to say at TAC that there were two goals. One was to work with dispatch, and the other was to produce actionable results. Because as you know, the challenge of a group like this is how do you move from being a salon, where you debate everything, to an actionable organization that says, here is what we think ought to move forward so that we at the Commission can rely on that kind of input. I am a huge believer in the multi-stakeholder process. You are the multi-stakeholders. And the beauty of the multi-stakeholder process is that things can get hashed out and solutions can be reached and proposals can be made that can come to us at the Commission to respond to. So I'm looking forward to your deliberations and your work product. And as Deborah has indicated, when we adopted the Open Internet Order, we gave you your first assignment and a deadline as well, which I believe is Halloween.
October 31st.
There's the day after Halloween. Or is it?
It's the day of
It is Halloween.
Right.
No symbolism there, folks. And please, no scares. Right. Let me and I also, Deborah talked about the dozen or so of you who are new to this group. Thank you for your willingness to step up and give of your most important resource, your time. We also have Allison Kuttner, who is the new head of the CGB, the Bureau, Consumer Bureau, who is going to be working with you and brings a similar sense of new excitement and new opportunity to the challenges you face. But it is terribly fitting and totally unplanned that we're meeting today. Because today is the first day that the Open Internet rules are in effect. There have never been rules this extensive and this flexible going forward in existence. And so it's a red letter day for consumers, for innovators, and for those that build and operate networks. And I'll talk about that in a second. When the court yesterday turned down the request of a handful of ISPs to stay the order, it was an historic moment for consumers and for innovators, because now there is a referee on the field. And we need your help in how that process will end up working. But let me share some thoughts from this side of the table, at least, on that process. We have said throughout the debate on the open internet that heavy-handed monopoly-era rules belong in the Smithsonian, not at the FCC. And that what is essential is that there be 3 bright line rules: no blocking, no throttling, no paid prioritization. And then, as I referenced, the referee on the field, who can make a call and throw the flag as necessary to address conduct that no one has anticipated, whether it be in this agency or in the ISPs, because things evolve. I've often said that we're not as smart as the internet. We're definitely not as fast as the internet, and we don't want to get in the way of the internet. But the fact that there are things moving at internet speed does not change the basic responsibility that those who build and construct networks and build and operate networks have always had to consumers and those who use their networks. Access to the network, interconnection with other networks, consumer protection, public safety, and national security. And just because you move from analog to IP does not mean that those basic relationships, which have for almost 100 years been the bedrock of the relationship between those who build and operate and those who use networks, does not mean that those have changed. What has changed is that the old style, father knows best, top-down micromanagement of networks by this agency cannot continue to exist because of the very nature of this fast-changing technology. And we have written the Open Internet rules in a way that prohibits those bad days, not that they weren't bad days, those old days, from coming back by saying there won't be retail rate regulation. There won't be unbundling. We're not going to require charts of accounts and accounting rules and all the kind of details that used to be associated with Title II service providers. The move to the new era, well, let me back up. One of the things that was fascinating about this whole debate and discussion about open internet is that people would look at the rules and imagine all the awful things that could happen on one side or the other. I call them imaginary horribles. And the reality that we have now is the rules are in effect, and people will get to see that the imaginary horribles were just that, imaginary. And that we are going to take a responsible, thoughtful approach to the new authorities that the court has told us we should go ahead and exercise. Now, making decisions in the public interest is a multifaceted kind of activity. Clearly, there are the bright line rules that we talked about, which are no blocking, no throttling, no paid prioritization. Something that, interestingly, the ISPs have now said they embrace, but when they were first proposed were the end of the world. And the other is our responsibility to make sure that broadband expands, gets distributed further, gets faster, gets competitive, or as we like to say, is fast, fair, and open. And in order for there to be the incentive for private sector companies to make the kind of investments necessary for the growth of broadband, there has to be an opportunity for return. That's why we don't have retail rate regulation. As many of you know, I came out of the wireless industry, and since 1994, the wireless industry has been living under Title II regulation with the forbearance of the old-style monopoly regulation. And it has been massively successful, both for the industry and for consumers. That kind of model is what we need to follow going forward, and we will, because by our actions we will be known. And our actions are not to micromanage, to tell companies how they ought to do business or that we're smarter than technology. But our responsibility is to say, wait a minute, that's a foul, throw the flag. And that those two responsibilities, to encourage investment and to protect consumers and innovation, can coexist and will coexist. We hear a lot by those who don't want any rules, arguing that, well, you know, the open internet rules are going to chill investment. Well, tell that to Charter that just said we'll spend $90 billion to acquire Time Warner Cable and Bright House. Companies that have never before seen regulation of their data services and now are subject to the open internet rule. The CEO of Charter, as I'm sure you've all seen in the press, has said that Title II did not discourage the investment, will not discourage further investment. Or the decision that was made by the French company Altice to spend $9 billion to acquire control of the cable company Suddenlink. One of the things, you know, that we heard a lot about during the debate on the open internet was, oh, this is going to chase capital abroad. You know, oh, this is going to be awful because everybody's going to want to go invest in Europe because things are so much better in Europe. Well, by golly, look what happens. Immediately after the open internet order, a European company decides the pasture looks pretty green in the United States, and they start investing in the United States, despite the fact that this new order is going to be in place, and today is in place. I think it is because people recognize that this order is pro-consumer and pro-innovator, and that does not mean that it is anti-network operators. And in our implementation of this order, we will be looking to you for guidance, and we will also be saying we understand that broadband, high-speed internet access cannot exist unless it's built out. and it's not going to get built out unless there's a return. And we're not going to be the folks who are discouraging that. So, I've gotten a little wound up on this issue because this is something that we feel strongly about. This is a big day. These rules, which have been long talked about and long debated, are live. It's something we should all celebrate, and it's something that is not an end, but is a beginning. And that is a beginning of a course that will last long beyond your tenure on this committee or any of the commissioners' tenures on this commission. As technology continues to redefine just what the marketplace looks like. But in that process, there will be something that did not exist yesterday. And that is, there will be a referee on the field. So thank you for your work, thank you for your commitment, and we look forward to the recommendations that will be coming out of this body. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Quite a statement from the chairman. Busy day. Sometimes we have an opportunity for Q&A, but obviously a very busy day for the chairman. So we will move forward with our agenda, and we are so fortunate to have our Bureau with us, our Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau with us this morning. So we'll call our Bureau folks up to the table. We'll see how you folks welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Alan.
Thank you very much.
You're going to go, one is, Karen, are you going to be up first? I'm going to go first. Okay.
I'm going to go first.
You're going to
I'm
go
going to
first.
go first.
I meant to,
yes,
yeah.
and then
Okay.
Karen.
So we're so pleased to have Allison Cutler here. She is new to the Bureau. I don't know if you've all read about this new transition, but Allison Cutler you are acting chief or chief?
I am currently acting chief.
Okay.
I'm week 2.
Week 2. So this is a lot to meet this Consumer Advisory Committee, but Allison is acting chief of the Bureau and has kindly agreed to come here and talk to us in her short time at the FCC and tell us a little bit about what the Bureau is up to, and then her crack team of deputies is going to one by one come and tell us a little bit more about what's going on. But Allison, welcome to the FCC and welcome to the Consumer Advisory Committee. We're so pleased to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd just like to welcome everybody here. I understand we have 16 new members, so your first meeting, my first meeting, so at least I have some other people in the same boat with me. Oops, we have a name tag.
Yes.
All right. As you know, I've recently been working in private industry, but have devoted much of my career to public service. So I couldn't be happier to be back in Washington and to have the opportunity to be at the FCC and to work with this group. I've had the chance to review some of your past work, which obviously has been very important to the work of the Commission and the Bureau in consumer complaints and universal service. So while I'm not an expert in week 2 quite yet, obviously I have a terrific team here and behind me that is, and I'm getting up to speed as quickly as I can. So really look forward to working with you and learning from you today and as we go forward. We've already talked a little bit about the responsibility you all have taken on even before your first meeting to start with the recommendation of the broadband label. So thank you in advance for diving in, and we certainly look forward to Halloween and getting the, I didn't realize it was Halloween, but getting the final version there. Also, just want to say thank you on mobile security from the last committee and the wireless telephone theft. And I understand some of you are working with the technology group on security going forward. So I think that's very important. And one of the working groups I understand is privacy as well. So that's an issue of importance to all of us here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the team, and everyone's going to walk through their areas of responsibility. Most of the team, I think many of you know already, and then I think we're happy to take questions in the end. I'm happy to take questions now, but probably isn't any. But I'm happy to take them if there are.
Yeah, we'll wait
till everyone goes.
The team has talked and generate some questions. So thank you, Allison, and you'll stick around for
yes, I'm going to stick
a
around.
while.
I'm just going to let the team take the seats.
Okay, perfect. So, Mark, you want to join? I don't have a card for Mark.
I think somebody else. She's bringing it.
Oh, we're just coming up with your card, Mark.
So I'm Karen Pelt-Strauss, and I know many of you, or I know many of your colleagues. I actually was involved in the original creation of this committee back in 2001, and Shirley, welcome back. I worked with Shirley many, many years, who was the chair of this committee, so it's a delight to be back. I help oversee the disability policy issues at the agency, and I wanted to let you know that you have a counterpart, in case some of you may not know, that there is a Disability Advisory Committee. In fact, many people from that committee used to be on this committee. They've now been moved over to that committee. You still have, of course, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Consumer Action Network, represented by Claude Stout, and today Tom Dowling, and now, and also Paul Schrader from American Foundation for the Blind. The Disability Advisory Committee covers virtually every issue related to disability, but specifically has a focus right now on 4 issues that it has subcommittees for. Communications, that's everything from telecommunications to access to advanced communication services such as email, texting, SMS, internet communications, you name it. If it's communications, it covers it. As well as a committee on emergency access. That's the second one. A subcommittee on video programming that covers closed captioning, video description, access to video devices. And by the way, the emergency access covers 911 access. That's the focus of that committee. Emergency access, or access to emergency information on television, would be covered by the video programming committee. And finally, the last subcommittee is on telecommunications relay services, which is a kind of a service that enables people who are deaf, hard of hearing, speech disabled, or deafblind to communicate with other individuals by phone or by the internet. And that committee also covers our National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program, which gives out $10 million a year to pay for the distribution of communications equipment given to low-income deafblind people around America. So we have the next Disability Advisory Committee coming up on June 23rd. Many of you may want to attend that, or at least watch it on the web. They may cover issues that address some of the things that you're companies and your organizations have an interest in. Also, one day before that, on June 22nd, we have a video description roundtable that's in conjunction with the Disability Advisory Committee. It's an event to explore the status of video description on television, including how to find video-described programs, new technologies to render video description, best practices for video description quality standards, and lots of other related issues. And for those of you who are not familiar with video description, it's the insertion of narratives into the natural pauses of television programming that enables blind people to follow a program when there's no audio. So, for example, if you're watching a television show and it's a murder mystery and there's no dialogue, if you're blind, you may not know what's going on, and so it explains, it's narratives explaining what's going on. You know, Mr. Smith is crossing the room to kill Mary. It will tell you that. In hopefully better detail than I just had. So we also have a disability rights office. For those of you who are not familiar with the agency, of course you know that we have various bureaus. The Disability Rights Office is housed in our Consumer and Governmental Affairs Office and addresses many of the issues, all of the issues related to disability access. We also work closely with other bureaus, and here's where you come in. We not only do work on, as I mentioned, communications and video programming access, we also look at the disability impact of all kinds of consumer issues. So things like emergency access, technology transitions such as the IP transition, open internet, mergers, privacy, all of the issues. I'm sure that all of the issues that you are addressing here will have a disability impact. So what I think would be helpful is if you come across an issue and you want to get the input of the disability community, of the Disability Advisory Committee, perhaps, work through your disability-related members or contact me, and feel free to say, we want to get the input from this other committee. In fact, one of the proposed resolutions being put forth on June 23rd in the Disability Advisory Committee is to support a recommendation from another advisory committee, from CSRIC, CSRIC, which works on network operations and emergency issues. So we're already doing this, and we hope that you take full advantage. There are another 37 members on that Disability Advisory Committee, and an additional, I think, 23 members on the subcommittee. So I think we have a total of around 60 additional people working on these issues. So in recent years, the Disability Rights Office and the Commission has been involved in implementing the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, as many of you know. And I just want to highlight two quick actions that the Commission just recently took to give you a sample of how we've been doing this. I mentioned the National Deafblind Program. That has been a pilot for the last 3 years. The Commission just recently proposed rules to make it permanent. Also, the Commission recently proposed rules, or rather adopted rules, to require that emergency information shown on television must be accessible to people who are blind and visually impaired through audio provided through the secondary audio channel on laptops and tablets and all kinds of second screens. A few years ago, we had already required this information to be accessible on televisions, and now we extended it to second screens. We also adopted rules, the Commission also adopted rules to require that equipment used to receive and play back television programming, such as set-top boxes, have a simple and easy-to-use mechanism to toggle back and forth from the main program audio to the secondary audio programming, so that people who are blind and visually impaired have easy access to that emergency information. A side benefit of that action will be that they will also have easier access to video description, which also comes over the secondary audio stream. So I could go on, but I'm going to stop there because I want to give my colleagues a chance to speak. I have another meeting that I have to attend, but if any of you would like to talk to me about any of this, feel free to contact me in my office. It's Karen.Strauss at FCC.gov.
I just want to ask a quick question about working with the DAC and this. So I wanted to go back to the issue of recommendations, and would you see the flip scenario of the DAC bringing a recommendation to the CAC?
Most definitely.
For our consideration at some point? Is
Yes.
that also a possibility?
I'm hoping that there's a real synergy between the two committees. Again, a lot of the issues that you cover should be addressed by the DAC, and most definitely some of the issues that they cover should be brought to your attention. So
That's good, yeah.
Most definitely.
So we should continue this conversation of
Yes.
ways that we can work together going forward.
Yes.
Because as those of you with history on the CAC know, disability issues were really a significant part of the CAC work, and we want to make sure we continue that work together, coordination and consideration.
Right.
And that doesn't stop because there is a DAC.
Most definitely.
So, yeah.
We look forward to
Thanks,
continuing to
Karen.
work with you. Thank you, everybody.
Mark.
Yes.
Thank you, Karen.
So my remarks will not involve any death or killing, unlike
Mark.
It's too early for that. Yeah. Although it will involve robocalls, so there might be one issue.
Which could be death.
Could be.
Running,
Yeah, that-
right, Chris? Running to answer a robocall, right? Isn't there could be potential death involved? Yes.
That's right.
As we at AARP would know. Those of us who have ever been at AARP. Mark Stone, another Cracker Jack Deputy Bureau Chief. So thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice to see new faces and familiar faces as well. I work on our general consumer policy issues along with our intergovernmental work. So I actually work with another advisory committee, the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee as well. So I wanted to give you a highlight of a couple of the big things that we've been working on in our group, robocalls and open internet labeling. You'll hear some more about that later in the day, but I wanted to touch a little bit on OI as well as robocalls. But first, robocalls. The Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or TCPA. As I'm sure you've heard, the chairman announced a significant decision on unwanted robocalls recently. The commission will consider that decision at next week's open meeting, and I wanted to give you a preview. His proposal would address more than 20 petitions that sought clarity from the commission and would enforce the TCPA. The chairman's proposing a set of actions that would, if adopted, close loopholes and strengthen consumer protections already on the books. It would be one of the most significant FCC consumer protection efforts since it established the Do Not Call registry jointly with the FTC in 2003. And the proposed rulings, again, if they're adopted, will provide much-needed clarity for both consumers and businesses. So first, the decision would empower consumers to say stop. Consumers would have the right to revoke their consent to receive robocalls and robotexts in any reasonable way at any time. I should probably take a quick step back to say what the TCPA does, amongst other things, is says if you're going to robocall or use auto-dial equipment to send messages to a consumer's wireless phone, you have to get their consent for both informational and telemarketing calls. If you do the same to a residential landline, you have to get consent for telemarketing. So there's a little bit of a distinction between the two. But again, the chairman's first proposal would be if a consumer's previously given consent, they have the right to revoke that consent later on if they decide they no longer want to receive those robocalls. Second, the proposal would give the green light for robocall blocking technologies. It would give the go-ahead for carriers to implement market-based solutions that consumers could use to stop unwanted robocalls. Third, the proposal would make clear that reassigned numbers are not loopholes. Consumers who inherit a phone number would not be subject to a barrage of unwanted robocalls to which a previous subscriber of the number consented. If a phone number has been reassigned, callers must stop calling the number after one call. Fourth, the item would define an auto dialer, which again is the keystone for robocalls to wireless numbers. It would define an auto dialer as any technology with the capacity to dial random or sequential numbers. The ruling would ensure that robocallers cannot skirt consumer consent requirements through changes in calling technology design or by calling from a list of numbers. Fifth, the decision would allow a very limited and very specific couple of exceptions to the consumer consent requirement for urgent circumstance messages. Free calls or texts, for example, that alert consumers to possible fraud on their bank accounts or remind them of important medication refills. This proposal is very clear that such messages, what they can and cannot be, and they most certainly cannot be marketing or debt collection. In addition, consumers would have the ability to opt out of even those permitted calls. They would have an opportunity on each call or text to say no more. So turning to OI, another big issue that you certainly know about by now, and you'll hear about later today, is the broadband disclosure label. As you know, the 2015 Open Internet Order interpreted the existing transparency rule to require enhanced disclosures related to performance, commercial terms, and other factors that consumers care about. Now, the Commission didn't prescribe a specific format for disclosure, but adopted a safe harbor approach. Specifically, providers can use a specified format to be recommended by you that would be deemed to comply with the transparency rule for disclosures to consumers for the information included in it. Again, you'll hear more about that later today, but we're excited you'll bring all your expertise to this important project. And that's it for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
So remember, folks, hold on, hold your questions. We're going to come back to Mark, and I think Karen had to leave, right? Yeah. But we're going to come back to Mark, and you. Are you done? Now we have Lyle Ashita. Thank you. Chief of Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division. So thank you so much, Lyle, for joining us. Appreciate it. So welcome.
Thank you. Chairwoman Berlin, honorable members of the CAC, it is just my pleasure to represent the division which is housed in the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau on this great day. I'm from Hawaii, so you're going to get a little bit of a language lesson, as Tracy Morris knows every time. So your language lesson today is aloha kakahiaka, a warm and pleasant good morning, not just the sun rose. I want to spend about 2 minutes just to talk about what we've teed up, and then after just a 2-minute introduction, I have the audacity for a bunch of asks. So here it comes. CAOD, the division I'm honored to lead, serves as sort of the public front face of the agency with respect to meeting and working with consumer-serving groups, grassroots, regional, and national. We've partnered with a number of folks in some of our efforts, and I'm going to tell you about sort of the efforts, and then the ask at the end is going to be one of potential work together. Teed up on our plate right now are a number of things. We are really focused on working with Karen Pell-Strauss and her team at the Disability Rights Office to work on issues associated with support to the disability community. And Karen might have touched on it, so let me say it sort of a little stronger. In no other work that the Commission does policy-wise does the Commission's policy efforts impact lives than among the disability community. And we want to be supporters of that, so we work really hard with Karen to reach out not just to the members of the disability community, but for those who are in their orbit. Because if you are on Relay and you're just trying to get your regular business done by calling Peapod Bot Giant, these are the guys who hang up on you because they think it's a telemarketer. And so even though businesses or other entities or people are not necessarily members of the community and maybe not directly impacted with our policy work, it impacts their lives. So we're working with Karen and her crew specifically on those sorts of things. Our team now is starting to tee up parts of the IP transition, and it's such a big and complex order that we want to sort of tee up these things in parts that are very consumer focused. So we're working internally with the engineers here in the FCC as well to sort of tee up the first part, which is associated with personal and public safety. And specifically, in the next month or so, we'll be able to launch some sort of public-facing material to help consumers understand the transition, because the words IP transition are a completely foreign construct for anybody who's living in Moline, Iowa and doesn't interact with the FCC directly. But it matters. It matters when your Lex says, hey, I got a bundle for you, and you have to understand what you're signing up for. And so the reason we want to hang on to the public safety aspects of it, what kind of batteries do I need? What kind of batteries backup do I need? And where do I live? Do I live in Tornado Alley or later on in October and November? Do I live in Hurricane Alley? How do I prep, right? So how do I maintain my connectivity? Those sorts of things we want to put into plain language form, graphical form, have some sort of maybe web-based, working with a great team of my colleagues. Howard Parnell leads the Web and Print Publishing Division, my sort of sister division, does a great job. So work with him to have these sorts of things publicly accessible in language, and that's my commitment to you. Also, we're working with, again, on the Incentive Auctions Task Force, and my team's just done this week with the last of 46 field events across this country in 42 cities in 14 weeks, and that's been really a big lift. For us, we are just, it's sort of a target. It's not necessarily a consumer-facing issue, but it will have consumer-facing ramifications toward the end, and that's been a big effort of ours. And finally, it is not issue-specific, but sort of engagement-specific. So I'm warning you, the cast is coming quickly. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve and enhance sort of the partners we work with on a day-to-day basis. We are better at our jobs by hearing from you. And the ask is this, right? There are any number of consumer-facing issues that are both kind of the new and sexy stuff like the IP transition, but also we still have a lot of work to do across America on just sort of the basic pocketbook issues that you feel are policy-wise mature, like slamming and cramming. But if you take a look at the aggressive work by Enforcement Bureau, that is still a problem across America, and the people who can least afford to have a higher bill are the people who are victimized. And these are the folks who need our work, our joint work together. So, as I look across this room at friends who are some old and all of you now are new, I want to make an observation. Each of us, by being on this esteemed board and also by what work we do on a day-to-day basis, our values are all aligned. We are here in support of consumers. And so my ask is this. Scott Marshall's my buddy. He can contact me in a second and knows how to tackle me. If in fact it can be as routine as I have an idea, right, please drop us a line. Please drop me a line, because we will be ultimately responsive. We'll be looking to work with you. The only caveat is we would like to, in concert with the chairman says, we want to work with you on things that are concrete, for which we have measurable outcomes which can benefit a large number of consumers. And numbers aren't the only things, because there are pockets of consumers, small in number but high in importance. Because at our division, what you can't measure, you can't manage, and what you can't manage, you can't achieve. But I want to work with all of you. So, if I ever have the opportunity to come back here again, I'm just filling in for my boss, Roger Goldblatt. And Roger, if you're watching the stream, how you doing? If in fact we have this opportunity to talk it again next year or any time between now and then, I'd like us to all be talking about something we've done on behalf of American consumers, because I think working together, I think we can do great things. And I will end with more of your lesson. I will end with, as you copy this, what you say is, e malama pono, which is take care of all of yourselves, and ahuiho, until we see again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lyle. So a few minutes, and just a few minutes for questions. And Allison is joining us back up at the table. So we've got Allison, Mark, and Lyle here. Does anyone have any questions? Remember, cards up.
Cool.
No question. Oh, there is a question. No? Yes? No questions? Okay. Well, Debbie, you missed the introductions in which I said to put your card up, and now I see you and I recognize you, so you're okay. Debbie with CWA, yes.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you. That was very informative. Can you give a little sense of how you all work, if at all, and overlap with the Enforcement Bureau?
To address that.
I can take a crack at that.
Yeah, why don't you go, and then
If you
I'll
want to,
add.
yeah. Very closely with the Enforcement Bureau when we're both coming up with our policies and potential rules. We work closely with the Enforcement Bureau because, of course, we want to make sure that they are enforceable. And then similarly, when they are considering an enforcement action, they work with our policymaking folks as they work with policymaking folks in other bureaus throughout the commission as well. So there's that sort of coordination. Our bureau is also the intake point for informal complaints, and as you would certainly understand, that's of interest with our Enforcement Bureau as well. So that's another avenue where our missions overlap.
That was my follow-up question. I thought complaints went to the Enforcement Bureau. They go to
So
this bureau?
I'm not our complaint expert. That's Michael Karowitz within the Bureau, but as a general matter, we do manage the portal for informal complaints. Formal complaints, by contrast, do go directly to the Enforcement Bureau. Now, I'm sure there's some exceptions to those general rules, and be happy to follow up on that.
And what is the analysis of the complaints that then helps inform the work of the Consumer Bureau, of all of you?
So at a high level, we, as you know, we have a brand new informal complaints portal, and part of the benefit of that brand new portal is the ability to do better analysis, more timely analysis, to take a look at trends and consider what sort of policy changes those might suggest, or to take a look at what rule violations that those may suggest, or some other type of analysis. So we do all those things with informal complaints, and again, our new system is making that easier and enabling us to do it more timely as well.
Thank you. Now you do have your 10 card up, and if you could identify yourself, and do you have a mic? Because I can't see. Raise your, yeah.
This is Amina Fazlullah with the Benton Foundation, and I just had a quick question. I was wondering if, as part of the charge of the Bureau, if there's work being done around broadband adoption, part of letting consumers know about, obviously their service plans and backup and all of that is incredibly important, but I was wondering if the Bureau also works on interfacing with other agencies and dealing with the issues around broadband adoption.
Hey Jeff. Okay, so that's a really good question. We're engaging partners to help us push broadband adoption. We just held 2 weeks ago a webinar with partners from the Department of Education, the Library Service, NTIA, and a number of folks targeted at senior citizens. So generally they can log in, but they're generally senior serving grassroots organizations, and we had a really good turnout. And our sort of slice of the pie talks about both informing about its benefits, and we go back and forth through the various national purposes from the old broadband plan, and also try and build relevancy and understanding so that potential adopters of broadband who have been sort of late adopters sort of understand benefits. And we continue our work. Wherever we go in the field, and we're in the field any number of times, sort of the understanding of benefits that we get from publicly accessible sheets that we have available at fcc.gov. So we'd like to work with you on that. Inform our work, and we find partners to try and push that message, if that's helpful. Thank you.
Very good. Does anyone on the phone have a quick question? Yeah. Okay. We are running a little late on our schedule, so I want to first of all thank our CGB folks for joining us today. Thank you so much, Allison, and Mark and Lyle and Karen, who has had to leave. But thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We are going to take a very quick 5-minute break, and I know that's dangerous. This is not an opportunity for you to go make conference calls and calendar arrangements. It's really just a very quick fill-up coffee, visit the men's room and the ladies' room, and please come back. We are a little off schedule. We need to make up time. We have 2 great speakers to hear from. So please, 3 great speakers, I think. Still 3 before lunch. So we have a heavy schedule. Let's go and come on back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Get a hard stop at 11:50.
We're going to get started.
I don't know.
I've had this trouble before.
Paul's still talking. Sorry.
I'll bring a laptop in and test it.
Ooh. Mood lighting, yeah. There's the danger of taking a break, I know, is that it's hard to get back to the table. So if everybody could have a seat, we'll get started again. We have, if you check your agenda, this is always what happens for those of you alumni, you know this. We always make a couple of changes based on things that happen always in the morning. And we always figure it out by the end of the day. But because we're running a bit late, because of the generosity of the chairman in his remarks, we are running a little bit late with our schedule. So what we've done is the all-important remarks of Jerusha Burnett. We did not want to give her too short a time to make those remarks, which are really important. So we have asked her, and she was very kind with her schedule, to rearrange her schedule and come back because our next 2 speakers have tight time frames as well. So Jerusha is going to come we had a little bit of flexibility in the afternoon. Jerusha will be here at 1:10, and she is taking some of that time from the committee structure. We'll make that up. So we have some flexibility in the afternoon. So she's going to be here at 1:10. Which means that we will now jump to the presentation of on privacy, on consumer privacy. Before we do that, I just wanted to quickly mention something. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty with our emailing to the CAC, and you may have noticed that this past week when Scott needed to mail out information. Some of you received it twice, some of you received it once. You remember that, Scott? Mm-hmm. And so there are some difficulties with the email list that the technical difficulties that Scott is trying to work out. As a result, one of the very important things with the task force, the Consumer Disclosure Task Force, is that those meetings are open to anyone on the CAC. There's a conference call number, and there's a notice that goes out to every single member of the CAC when we have those meetings. I think that the notice of the last meeting did not reach everyone, unfortunately.
It went out late. Hence, going forward, we're going to send that notice out to the full committee much earlier.
Yes. Okay. But, I've just learned that some people may not have known about it. So that's unfortunate. We'll make sure, however, that those notices go out in advance, early enough, and often enough, so that you all are aware of those meetings, because that is very important.
Every 2 weeks for the...
It's roughly at the longest a 2-week period in between the meetings, sometimes maybe less than that, but we'll make sure that you get notice of those meetings, that you get the call-in number, because I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate if you want to. It's very important to the process. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you. Okay. Parole. One very important issue for us going forward in this, thank you, is privacy issues. A really interesting new issue for us. We're pleased that we have some new CAC members who have some expertise on this issue as well, and some returning members too. So Parul Desai, who is Assistant Bureau Chief and Director of Consumer Engagement for the CGB, is with us this morning. And thank you so much, Parul, for joining us.
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces and also the new faces as well. So as you know from this morning, we have new rules that go into effect today. As many of you may already know, that the Open Internet Order did reclassify broadband Internet access service. But while it did so, it also did forbear from many of the Title II provisions that are applicable to telecom carriers. One provision that we did not forbear from, though, was Section 222, which generally requires a telecom carrier to protect the confidentiality of customers' proprietary information and focuses in more detail on a category of information known as customer proprietary network information, or CPNI. Generally speaking, Section 222 imposes limits on a telecom carrier's ability to use, disclose, or permit access to individually identifiable CPNI that it receives solely by virtue of providing the telecom service to the customer. In addition to some specific exceptions, this sort of individually identifiable CPNI can be used and or disclosed with customer approval or in providing the telecom service to the customer. So this is generally what Section 222 is about. So while we did not forbear from the applicability of Section 222 to ISPs, we did forbear from applying the implementing regulations to the ISPs. So the order did suggest that there would be further proceedings to determine what would future rules look like specific to broadband access service providers. So we're in a similar situation where back in 1996 we had the Telecom Act, and there was a period where we had to identify implementing rules. So we're in that period right now where we're looking at what those rules should look like with respect to ISPs. Since then, the Commission has started a conversation on what Section 222 should look like as it concerns ISPs. As some of you know, and some of you participated in a workshop that we had back in April. To start this conversation, we had two panels. One panel discussed the privacy implications associated with ISPs, and the other panel discussed the application of Section 222 of the Communications Act to ISPs. As I mentioned, the workshop was just the beginning of a conversation. The staff here at the Commission is still in learning mode. Since then, we've also issued an enforcement advisory, which has provided guidance on how the Enforcement Bureau will enforce Section 222 with respect to broadband Internet access service providers. And in that advisory, the Enforcement Bureau has stated that it will focus on whether ISPs are taking reasonable and good faith steps to comply with Section 222. So that's where we are right now. We're still looking at this. The Commission is still, or the staff of the Commission is still studying the issue, and that's where we are right now.
Thank you, Parul. I appreciate that review, and I want to open it up now for questions from the CAC. Thank you. And if you could identify yourself on the...
Sure. This is Chris Calabrese from the Center for Democracy and Technology. Thank you very much. We participated in the CP&I 222 workshop, and it was really a great start on figuring this issue out. So thank you for that. I have I have one CP&I question and one other question. And let me start with the other question, which is, are you going to touch on some of the other privacy issues that the Commission is, or should I ask about them now?
Well, this is all. This is it for privacy.
This is what you got.
I don't think there's no one else coming after.
Okay, so then I'll ask my. So real quick, CP&I do we have any more information on the timeline in terms of when you think consideration will happen generally? Regulations may come out. Anything else?
We haven't decided on a time frame yet. We're still talking to stakeholders. We welcome stakeholders to come in and talk to the staff on their concerns or thoughts about this as we move forward, but we don't have a time frame just yet.
So then I guess my next question is, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of media reports about the use of sort of portable or false cell phone towers, often called stingrays, which can be used to track individuals by essentially tricking their cell phones into thinking that they're real cell phone towers and using that to learn their location. These are devices that are used by law enforcement, but they also obviously raise substantial security issues. There was an FCC committee, or there was a group formed at the FCC to sort of begin to look into this question of how stingrays were approved and are approved, and other issues surrounding them. So I'm wondering if you can give us any update, or any more about what that entity has been up to.
I don't know anymore. Is that what CISREC are you having someone from public safety talk about? Is this the CISREC's? There might be someone.
I don't know whether they're covering that issue or not. I don't.
They may have a better answer. I don't know, but.
Okay, because then I don't know if there's a way to sort of table questions or
yes,
pass questions up the food
We're
chain.
not that formal, but definitely you can bring that question up again. Yeah.
Great. And so I guess last question, E911 and location information. There's been some discussion around the privacy impact of limiting how E911, which is obviously critical, that you get location information in the context of E911 and learning about where someone is in an emergency, but also limiting that so it's doesn't become another way that individuals give up privacy simply by dint of having a cell phone. Has there been any sort of consideration or I know there has been some consideration, but do you have any sense about where the E911 and location discussion is?
I'm sorry, I don't have any more information on that. Sorry.
All right, no problem. And so maybe I'm new, so if there's a way that I can figure out how we can plug in, because I think these are the kind of issues that the privacy subcommittee, at least I would be interested in on the privacy subcommittee, and beginning to figure out some of these really cutting-edge privacy issues that are directly within the FCC's jurisdiction and domain. So, thanks.
Thanks, Chris. So those issues, those questions, great questions, and certainly great ones for our working group to consider going forward. Yes, and identify yourself on the mic as well with a hand up there.
Rick Elrod from the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. I was wondering, in the interim, while the FCC is considering rules, how should consumers address their concerns or their complaints? Should they take them to the Commission's Enforcement Bureau, and what should they be citing, so to speak, to do it?
So I know Jerusha will talk about this later. So we still do have, in effect, the transparency rule, which part of the transparency rule is that the providers have to disclose their privacy policies. So that is one aspect that's still in effect. If there are complaints, you can file through our new complaint system, the Consumer Help Center. And so in the order, we've said that you can file informal complaints through the complaint system, and there will be an option for internet-related complaints.
Thank you.
I'd like to see if anyone on the phone has any questions. Okay. Does anyone else around the room have any questions on privacy issues? Alex? Identify yourself.
Hi, Alex Reynolds from the Consumer Electronics Association. I'm wondering if there's any formal liaison between the FCC and the FTC on privacy issues.
I'm not well, I wouldn't call it a formal liaison, but the FCC and FTC do work very closely together. As you know from the workshop, we also had a co-moderator on our panel. So our our agencies do work closely together on these issues.
Yes.
Hi, Parl. I'm Hannah Sassaman with Center for Media Justice and the Media Mobilizing Project. This might have been a good question for Lyle when he was here a little bit earlier, but just thinking about the chairman's statements about adoption, like we were really involved in the Broadband Technologies Opportunities Program. We built some of the 77 computer labs that were built as part of that program, and when people came into our labs in Philadelphia, we often found that besides cost, which is what we found was the biggest barrier to adoption, that fear around privacy, especially for seniors and especially for folks in low-income neighborhoods, that was a really big issue. And so I'm wondering, and I was just thinking back on the different workshops that team, that Lyle's team did all over the country. I think they just visited over 40 cities in 14 days or something to that effect. I'm wondering if that kind of consumer education is something that you guys are looking at as well, or if you could talk a little bit more about that, around privacy for new adopters.
That's something that we'll definitely consider. I would also point out that in the Open Internet Order, when the analysis that the Commission did on whether or not to forbear from Section 222 included this idea of consumers, if consumers would or could refrain from using Internet access service if they felt that their privacy was at issue, and that would diminish adoption, that would diminish consumer demand. So that idea was part of the analysis of not forbearing from Section 222. So that's something that the Commission has been thinking about. That's great.
Interesting point. Any other questions? Yeah, very interesting point. Okay. Thank you very much, Pearl. Excellent. Look forward to hearing more about this as we go forward. I don't think our next speaker is here, so we're actually now a little ahead of schedule. Scott.
Isn't it funny how it goes?
Yes, scheduling is always fun. Well, we have a few minutes here, so I think what's going to happen in the afternoon, now that we've moved Jerusa to the afternoon, is we won't have as much time to continue the discussion that we started this morning. So this is a little disjointed, I apologize, but we might want to get back to our discussion about working groups while we're waiting for Jeffrey Goldthorpe. You're not in the room, are you, Jeffrey? I don't think so. No. Okay. Yeah. So while we're waiting for Jeffrey to come down, we can continue this discussion and talk about the working group. So where we left off was a discussion about whether or not we need a standalone, for those of you who might not have been in the room at this point. There was a question raised as to whether or not we need a standalone broadband working group, or do the other working groups cover all the issues that a broadband working group would address? And that is a question that only the members of this CAC can address. So I want to open that up for discussion to see if we can eliminate the broadband working group, which right now is our largest working group with 25 members. So there are 25 of you in this room who thought that was a group that was important enough to sign up for. So tell me, do we need a standalone broadband working group? And raise your cards. Well, I'm going to take Katie first because and then she got her card up. Katie, Michael, and is that Debbie or Ken? Okay, Debbie's, okay. So let's go for it.
I guess starting off, my question to the group is in terms of, let's just skip broadband for right now. What comes under the topic of consumer protection in everyone's opinion here, so we can figure out whatever there is that's left over that might go into broadband or might be a way to divide up the folks who are on broadband. So in looking at consumer protection, what does that entail? Does that entail the I guess, as I was reading, the equivalent to a nutritional information thing for transparency as to how companies are supposed to report compliance with Open Internet Order. IP transition, I feel like that is a big enough issue in itself. There are a lot of things going on with the testing, the idea of experimenting and moving forward to new technologies. I was at a panel the other day where they talked about how government should be able to fail to test out things to get there. I think the IP transition is a perfect example of that, because we've got a lot of great technologies that I think could move us forward, but we've got some things standing in the way of trying those out. So I think IP transition should stay by itself. Media, honestly, that's not my expertise, so I couldn't make any comment on that. Privacy, I'm guessing, Chris, you said Stingrays, CPNI, is that where we're going with privacy? Possibly.
From my perspective, it would be great if we did, but I mean, I obviously don't control the group.
So, yeah, right. That's just, I mean, those were your suggestions that you put out. Universal service does certainly seem to link into broadband. However, universal service includes a number of topics like E-rate, Lifeline, Link Up, and isn't there one more?
High cost.
High cost. Thank you. So, and when was that?
Telemedicine, like the rural time.
Okay, telemedicine. Yes, thank you. Telemedicine is, I mean, I almost feel like telemedicine should be like completely separated out. But, so we've got those different points that I think in putting, if those all for universal service fall under broadband, great, but what are the things for broadband that fall outside of all of those topics?
I think that's the question.
So what are other people's opinions on what falls into broadband outside of those particular issue areas, so that we can make a decision?
Okay, thank you, Katie. Michael?
She laid out just about everything I said. I just wanted to make clear that I wasn't necessarily advocating to eliminate broadband. I just was hoping it would be better defined. As Katie so clearly pointed out, many of the other working groups are pretty easily defined, and so.
Right. So what defines broadband? Is that that's the question on the table, I suppose. What defines broadband? If we can't define it, that's a problem. Jeff?
Would it narrow it too much so that there are things that people would include in broadband that this doesn't encompass if it were limited to broadband deployment?
That's one idea. We can.
Does broadband deployment fall under universal service, since there's been a lot of discussion in expanding the universal service fund?
It's inevitable there will be some overlap between the groups. I think we can't avoid it all. I just think that and I'm not saying this is clearly the answer. I'm just suggesting that that's a very important aspect of broadband.
Let's just throw things out for now. Let's see. Debbie, Amina, Ken, and I'm sorry, I can't read your card, but Trail. Christina, thank you. Debbie.
I was going to ask you to motivate and explain the mission of these working groups.
Sure. Very good question, Debbie, and I think that is a good place to start the discussion. So the working groups exist to generate exactly what the chairman's little pep talk was all about, which is for us to produce and to generate action. We can't do it here in our one-day meetings. So that is to produce recommendations for the commission, for the commission to act on. So we don't want to just sit here and listen. We want to consider actions for recommendations to the commission. How do we do that? We break down and try to break down the work we have into subsets, which we call working groups, and then take those issues and say, what do we need to consider as a committee What are the issues within these subsets that we want to consider for consumers, and what do we want to recommend and advise the FCC on? And then we draft recommendations, and that work takes place within the working groups. So that's why it's important to have these working groups, because we can't do that work here when we meet 3 times a year for one day. The purpose of these meetings are to get information from staff, from the commissioners, from other experts, and then take that information and go off and discuss and take the expertise that you each have around the table, sit down and meet and say, here's an issue that I'm aware of, as Chris was just talking about. Here are some issues that I'm aware of. I think that these are my concerns that I have for consumers, and I think we should do a recommendation to the FCC that says, that has these following considerations, and who's willing to start drafting, and then the working group works on drafting and then presents it to the Consumer Advisory Committee for approval. So that's the process. So that's what the working groups do. And so these working groups try to exist to consider most of the issues that might come up within this commission, that this commission would be interested in, that concern consumers. So that I hope that covers it and helps as you start to think about issues within working groups.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Absolutely.
Does the working group then select a chair to drive the agenda?
Scott and I will select the chairs. We have already asked for individuals to volunteer to tell us whether or not they are interested in chairing working groups. We have names of all of you. That process is not done. So after today, today is a really good opportunity to think this through, to continue that thought process of whether or not you would like to chair. Hopefully, individuals who have already thought about chairing will not change your mind, but others are still welcome to think about chairing, and we will then go back and select chairs. In many cases, particularly for the large ones, co-chairs for working groups, and get those decided on hopefully in the next week. Okay, let's just give, if we don't mind, let's just give this a minute, 2 minutes. Okay, Amina, and let's see if we can make our remarks really brief. We've got our next speaker here, but I just do want to continue this for a couple minutes.
Hi, I'm Amina with the Benton Foundation. As a past CAC member, I just wanted to highlight a few things to maybe help clarify the discussion. The way the working groups work, there's an opportunity within the group to put these recommendations together, to also, as you just mentioned, decide on speakers that we might want to invite to help inform the full committee. Also invite speakers into the subgroups. And so I don't really have a particular opinion on how we split up broadband versus IP transition or USF, but I will note that all of these issues will have a lot of work ahead of us, and so I think maybe we could consider broadband to be a bit of a catch-all. If down the road we decide there's something around open internet that we want to discuss or do a recommendation on, that might be a good committee to have on backup to handle any of the issues that might not come up in, say, IP transition or USF, which are a lot more specific. So those are just the 2 brief remarks I had to make.
Thank you, Amina. Let me make a suggestion. One sentence. Yeah. Ken gets 1 sentence.
My suggestion would be my suggestion would be that once you and Scott pick the chairs for the committees, to have a conference call of those committee chairs, and have them select which topics they are going to focus on in their individual things, as opposed to trying to figure that out here. And I'm sorry, it was 3 sentences.
I would be shocked if you got it to one sentence. Well, we have our next speaker here, so we're going to have to hold. I see we have two cards left, Christina and Laura. So I apologize, but we do have our next speaker here, who we have a hard stop at 10 of 12, because our recorder, correct?
Yes.
Needs to record something else.
For the chairman.
For the chairman?
Yes.
Well, you can't be late for that. So we need to stop, and so let's invite our next speaker. You don't have slides, do you, Jeff?
I don't have slides.
Okay, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi. So you can come sit here.
Okay.
We will continue. We will discuss. We'll be back.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
That is you. Yes.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Is it Jeff?
It's Jeff.
Okay, Jeff is Associate Bureau Chief, Cybersecurity and Communications Reliability with the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and we appreciate your coming. We are anxious to hear your discussion that you're going to provide for us. We've worked together in our previous CAC, and we're looking forward to working together going forward.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to speak to you. I'm going to be talking to you today about another advisory committee. It's not a third advisory committee that I'll speak a little bit about later. That's the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, the CISRIC. But first I want to talk about the TAC, the Technological Advisory Committee. Okay, I'm just hearing the speaker over there. The TAC is, as I said, another advisory committee. Focuses on sort of technological issues that are over the horizon. And in the last year, the last instance of the CAC and the TAC, there was a collaboration between the two advisory committees involving smartphone security. And the idea was to start with consumer outreach, to develop a set of consumer outreach ideas and principles. That was done last year, and that led to a really good body of work that we still have, and we appreciate that. The next phase of the work is to develop a common user interface, a way for users to make use of their smartphones and to set the security and privacy features in their smartphones in a sort of a common way, so that regardless of the platform, whether it's an iPhone or an Android or whatever it happens to be, the user is presented with a common set of questions that are relevant to their preferences for security and privacy features in the device. And that the device can then go and make use of the answers to those questions to configure the device so that the user's preferences are then enabled, are then applied in a device, so that the user really doesn't have to do anything but answer a set of plain English, simple, straightforward questions, and then all of the sort of the geeky stuff is done without their knowledge and without their having to do anything, press buttons or answer fancy questions or whatever the case may be. That's the vision. And so the idea would be that the CAC would develop the questions. What are the questions that a consumer or a user, an average user, would be expected to answer to indicate their preferences for security and privacy settings on a smartphone device? And these should be plain English questions, straightforward, and a relatively small number of questions that they could be presented with. And then the TAC would then take those questions and develop a set of generic requirements that could be used to either smartphone vendors or by app developers to develop apps that would then configure the device to act in the way that the user prefers or has indicated as their preference. So that the TAC has already started to recruit folks from the app community to help with this, and they've gotten started on their piece of the work. And then what we'll do is we'll take the questions that the CAC comes up with and marry them with the technical work to come up with recommendations this year. We hope that that we can then carry forward and apply. That's the vision of what we're trying to do, sort of like a more forward-looking smartphone security and privacy configuration environment that is, sort of less confusing to users. It's like it doesn't matter what device they're using; they get the same questions, and the device is then configured the way they choose. So I just wanted to come before you and kind of let you know how we, at least I'm coming at it more from a tech perspective. Scott's looking at it more from a CAC perspective, but that's the vision.
So Chris has his card up. Laura, you have your card up for new. Okay, perfect. And my question can weave into whenever you want to respond to this. Ken, do you have your card up new? Yes. Okay, perfect. So Jeff, just let us know too. I want to just know from a process standpoint how we can work together with the TAC and the CAC and.
Okay, that's a good question. Last year, there was actually a couple of conference calls. The groups actually worked together, collaborated live, and that was constructive. Not that other things weren't, but that was definitely constructive. So I would advise that kind of an approach this time as well. And conference calls obviously work better. Most of the time, working groups get their work done that way. So an approach like that would be good. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. I mean, last time I think we had, and Ed helped me out here. You may speak to this at some point if you want. We had certain interaction with the TAC. We were working. Yeah. You need a mic.
A subgroup of the Consumer Empowerment Committee, I think it was called at that time, working with a subgroup of one of the TAC working groups. Obviously, it was a constrained timeline, and you guys kind of had a meeting following ours, and we were waiting for output from that meeting to take a next step possibly in this newly reconvened CAC. But I thought those were productive interactions and phone calls, and I would envision if we're going to continue to work together on a project like this, at least having check-ins in that format would make sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think my follow-up to that is if there's a specific product that we're working on together that helps to sort of give us the guidelines to do that. So, yeah. Okay, let me go to the cards. And I'm sorry, I apologize. I was writing, so I don't know who had their cards up first. But I've got 3. So I just saw Chris, I saw Ken, I saw Laura. So my apologies, that's how my eyes darted around, but we'll get all your questions in. So, Chris.
Thank you. Wow, this raises so many questions for me. It's fascinating. First one is, which subgroup would you think this would end up in? You don't have to answer that, but can you just give us a sense about the types of questions that you're envisioning? I mean, there's so much here. Like a consumer is largely, I think, going to say, yes, I want security. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're not, you know what I mean? They're not. Yeah. And then, on the privacy preference side, I mean, that is a minefield. Might actually be too gentle a term for if there's a phone is going to start to set device preferences for people's privacy options across the device. I mean, that's a tremendous undertaking. It's going to, raise a lot of questions. Does when you download the app, do the permissions you download there override those? How are you going to police those? Are they only for the operating system on the device? It's just, so I guess maybe just my initial question is what kinds of questions did you have in mind? Maybe that'll help me understand the scope of this exercise. Thank you.
I think that, for example, one of the kinds of questions might be what kinds of access to data would you prefer? What restrictions on access to data? Access to things like contact lists. When, and as you say, when new applications are loaded, what restrictions on access to apps? I understand that there's a lot of different kinds of questions that could be asked, but what we're asking this group to do is to think about the kinds of questions that a consumer would care the most about. And then the underlying technical issues are issues that the TAC would then turn to and come back to us with recommendations for. So, I do see your point. It's not an easy task, but still, I'm hoping that there are ways that you all can help us out, put your heads together, and give us the best wisdom or guidance you have on what a consumer would care the most about.
And I just want to respond, Chris, to your question about I think your question about what subgroups, you were talking about what working groups, is that what you were thinking? So I think you've raised some, we haven't had the privacy experts before around the table. Now we do. We're blessed with that to keep that issue front and center. So I think if we have a privacy working group, we have a consumer working group, there's no reason why these issues would not be before both working groups, or at least not go before the privacy. We need that expertise when we're looking at these issues. So traditionally, before the process, they were in the consumer working group. I think they would definitely continue in the consumer working group, but the privacy issues obviously are there and need to be considered, so they could be in both working groups. There's no reason why the working groups couldn't work together on these issues. So there's no hard rules here, in other words. Ken, and then Laura, and then Eve. Oh, I'm sorry, Christina, after that.
With the new expanded CAC, I think we have a lot more privacy experts than we did in the past. Are you reaching out as well to other groups? And I guess the other question I have is that certainly there are concerns with privacy with apps in the first place. So it almost seems like you got a circular sort of thing going on here, which I think sort of add to the challenge of what you're going to be doing.
So you asked, are we reaching out to other groups? You mean other advisory committees or other groups?
No, I mean outside. I mean other privacy groups and consumer groups.
Yeah, the TAC, for example, is reaching out to a number of groups, but they're tending to reach out to more groups in the tech sector, so app developers and smartphone vendors and so forth. They're going to be reaching out and talking to folks that are going to enable capabilities in their devices or their apps based on the questions that we get from the CAC. So that's a little different. Maybe it's different from what you meant. We're not. They don't tend to be reaching out to the kinds of groups that maybe the CAC would. I guess the CAC is also reaching out to other groups, right, and inviting folks to participate. So I guess that's how I would answer your question. Was there more to your question that I?
No, that
okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay, we are going to be efficient here. I have Laura.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a few things that I wanted to ask about, and one is just to build on Chris's question again about the granularity of these questions that you're talking about, the privacy settings. One problem that we're facing right now is that it's not all uniform. Not all operating systems approach privacy with the same level of granularity. So some have the privacy settings at the device level, and then once a consumer approves an app, installs an app, then that app always has access to any of the information that is toggled on in the device settings. And others allow consumers to toggle privacy settings based on an app-by-app basis. So I just I think that that's something that I'm still not clear quite based on your answer on whether or not that would be like the questions that the CAC recommends be asked of individual consumers would whether we could not only recommend questions but also recommend at what point they are asked. Are they asked every time that a consumer goes into the settings on an app by app basis? Are they only asked once when the consumer starts up the device? So that's one issue. Another question that I wanted to ask relates to E911, which is, again, something that was mentioned in the privacy context. And since the Public Safety Bureau did issue the E911 order, and I know that this isn't something that you specifically spoke on today, but since the Bureau drafted the order, and part of it is to require carriers that are implementing the improved location accuracy requirements to file privacy and security plans with the Bureau prior to implementation, and presumably those plans will be put out on public notice. I'm curious whether or not there's a role for CAC there in reviewing those privacy and security plans. And then just one more thing, which is that I was curious whether security will be part of the. I guess this is a question for the privacy working group, so I'll hold off on that one, and I'll just add on again to Chris's question about Stingray, which previously he asked a question about Stingray, and we didn't quite get an answer. But since you're here, and I'm sorry again to put you on the spot because I know that you're here to speak about the CAC-TAC partnership and not specifically about Stingray, but because public safety is heading up the Stingray task force, I'm curious what the status is of that and whether or not there's a possible role for CAC to collaborate with the Stingray task force.
Okay, so there was somebody taking notes, right?
Yes, sorry about that.
I'm going to make a suggestion. Are we cut off? Are you telling us I can see I'm getting motions from the booth that we have to wrap up because they have to run to record the chairman. We are so sorry, and I apologize to Christina and who else has the card? Eve, I am so sorry. Okay, well, but these questions have been excellent, and I'm dying to hear Christina and Eve's questions. I apologize. But here's an idea that we have, and this probably won't be recorded, but maybe I can do it in 1 minute. We have 1 minute. You said 11:50. Scott and I were just chatting, and we're thinking that maybe this would be good to have a task force with folks who have strong interest in both consumer and privacy. So maybe some of our leaders and members of the privacy working group and the consumer working group might get together and create a task force to work with you on this. So that's a possibility as well. So we'll take a look at that going forward. But Jeff, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And we apologize to those who didn't get their questions in. We will try and do that in some other fashion. But thank you very much, Jeff.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Now it's 11:50.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so we apologize. I think our mics are off or cut off. I don't think this has ever happened to us. But
the chairman trumps it all.
The chairman trumps it all. All right, don't leave yet because we can talk about things that won't be on the public record, but so we can make logistics, I guess, right? We can talk logistics. We just can't talk content. Yeah. Okay, so we now have a rather long break, and it's due to the fact that our booth has to close down. So we are off record now.
Somebody from my office should be here. I just didn't want to Thank you very much.
All right, Scott.
Ready to go?
Let's go because otherwise.
Yeah, let's get it go. Yep.
Should not be done.
Let's do it. Go ahead.
You want me to start?
You call to order.
But you're going to introduce. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming back and being prompt here. We appreciate it. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Scott Marshall for our next introduction. Scott?
Thank you, Debbie. Many of us in the room here are lawyers, and those of you who are not should be thankful that you're not. But I feel particularly fortunate here at the FCC as a lawyer because I have a darn good lawyer that keeps me out of trouble. And she's our next speaker. Paula Silverthau has been with the Administrative Law Division of our Office of General Counsel for, well, she knows her stuff. And for the past however many years that I've been doing this committee, she's been the go-to person on this Federal Advisory Committee Act stuff, which those of you who've been with us before know about. And she's going to give her famous presentation on the rules of FACADEM. Paula?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I just can't live up to that, that introduction. But I do my best. One of the issues with FACA is that there aren't, for all the questions you might have for Scott, there is so rarely guidance in the GSA rules. So that's why it sometimes gets a little tricky. But there are some things that are pretty in black and white. And I try to touch on some of that here in this little primer. And as everyone knows, you're at an open public meeting, and openness in government is one of the major goals of the FACA. And for that reason, we have notice of meetings. We publish it in the Federal Register. We publish it on our website. There's public attendance, and documents that come before you or that your working groups use and move forward in recommendations are all publicly available. So now I'm going to, now we've covered the first page. Now I'm going to try to get down to some of the practical things. Please remember to include Scott on all of your emails, because there shouldn't be sort of off the record communications or deliberations that the DFO is not a part of. And that relates back to the openness in government. So any meetings of I think you have working groups, is that right? Yeah, any meetings of the working groups should be called to order by Scott, and that can be electronic if that's the way you do it. It could be, through email discussions and deliberations, but just a reminder that Scott needs to be on all of those communications, and that's because we're trying to keep a good record that if people are interested in why did you come up with that recommendation, you have it. We have the full backup for it, and that's really important, particularly if you have a recommendation for something that might move into a rulemaking. And then we could, submit all of that information that looks relevant and the most useful into the record. So it helps you guys move your ideas forward. Just as a reminder, for those who have not been on an advisory committee before, the committee chair and your vice chair could be one of the focal points for all of your communications, and they will advise you about any informal working groups and your membership in the working group, and they will be, your committee chair would be instrumental in actually running the meetings along with Scott and suggesting meeting agendas. Scott is the DFO, Designated Federal Officer, and he's responsible for actually calling all the meetings, for publishing and approving your agendas. A footnote on this, if you see a meeting coming up and you think you have an idea of something you want to be included, please don't propose it at the meeting at the last minute. All agenda items really should be announced in the PN and Federal Register notice. And if it's sort of a related topic that just dawns on you, we can squeeze it in. But if it's something totally new, that doesn't relate to anything else that's on the agenda, that would be a problem, because the goal of the public notice is to let people in the public who are interested in attending know that what the topics are going to be. Sometimes that's been a problem in the past. Scott, our DFO, would be responsible for attending all the meetings, and either he or FCC staff who assist him should be also chairing and present at all of the working group meetings. And the agenda should also be run, of those meetings, should not be sua sponte, they should be run, through Scott. The working group meetings don't need an advance public notice, so it can be more informal. If you think of an idea 2 hours before the meeting, that's okay, as long as Scott approves it. But really, the FCC sort of tries to control the agenda, because that's a responsibility. And any questions that you have about, how advisory groups function, can go to Scott and or through your chairperson, through Deborah. And if they know the answers, they'll let you know. And if not, they probably talk to someone in my office, which is Office of General Counsel. But please don't hesitate to come to them with any questions. One topic that is sometimes confusing to people is the informal working groups and how they function, as opposed to how the full parent committee functions. So I'll go over that real briefly. Informal working groups typically involve less than a quorum of the full membership. So you're never having a majority of the full members be on the working group. And as a result, the working groups do preparatory work, gathering information, developing working plans, coming up with ideas, drafting reports, anything that's preliminary and anything you folks and the DFO think are appropriate to bring to the full parent FAC. So the working group is preparatory, and typically the working group meetings they're informal, but they're also closed to the public, because it's just you folks meeting to develop some ideas. If you want to have outside speakers, like if there's some academic expert on something that you want to bring in, or just some expert generally, you can do that. And what we always advise is that person, you can invite them, tell Scott you would like to do that, and he'll extend the invitation, that the expert would come in and would give information and could answer all the questions you have, give you some new ideas. You can have a back and forth with the expert, and then typically that expert would, or whoever it was you had in, would then leave the room and would not be part of your deliberations. So that way you sort of have a sort of clear-cut way of handling things. Those meetings would be closed. Now, if you do want to have open meetings, there's nothing that prevents that. But if you go to open meetings, what we've been advised by GSA is if you want to have an open working group meeting, that's fine. But then you should really probably do a PN and open it up to the world. So either it's sort of the closed membership or it's open to everybody. You wouldn't need 15 days notice. It wouldn't have to be published in the Federal Register. There could be some sort of effective, posting it on the website. That would be fine. The other thing I'd mention is that, and I don't know what your practice is here, it is possible to have people participate in working groups and be appointed working group members who have a narrow interest in just the work of the working group and might not be a member of the parent advisory committee. So, theoretically, if you knew of someone who you thought was really good on a particular subject, and the agency and your groups might benefit by having that person participate, you could talk to Scott, and they might be able to be invited just to work on the working groups. That's something that's happened more frequently in the recent past than when we started doing this. The other thing about the informal working groups is that your working groups develop recommendations that go up to all of you in the parent FAC. You can't just put out the recommendations and send them over to the Bureau or to the FCC, because that would make you a parent FAC. So you work through the parent FAC, and your recommendations go up from the working group, and then they get voted on by everyone. Again, the problem is that if you just decided this was great, and 10 of you were working together in a working group, and then you published it and said that this was the formal advice on behalf of everyone, that would have converted the working group into a parent FAC, and you might have had closed meetings, and then you'd be in violation of VACA. And so then we'd have to disregard the recommendations, which would not be a happy result. So just remember, they go up through the FAC. Okay. The last thing to just keep in mind is that sometimes you're working in your working groups or as a whole on sort of hot topics, and some of you might be experts, or you might represent groups and someone asked you to do an op-ed piece on something that you've been working on in the working group. No one is squelching your own individual views. Go right ahead, present your views. But if you are publishing views and saying that you're also a member of the advisory committee, you just want to make clear in some way that your op-ed piece is not a formal piece on behalf of the advisory group, but it's your individual views. Because we've had people in good faith say, do an op-ed piece and then sign it, so-and-so, head of X, Y, and Z advisory committee, and then people think that that's something that your view has actually been voted on as the advisory committee view, whereas it hasn't been. So, just to try to keep that in mind and not inadvertently make it seem as though you're representing a broader view than your own. I think that is about it, but I can answer any questions if you have any.
Ken, is your card new?
Yes.
It was hard to tell.
It's not even dusty. Two of our working groups have total membership that exceeds the quorum for the full committee. I think you know where I'm going there.
Yeah, it would be better to try to call that down.
So would the issue be, since it's very, very rare, if ever, that everyone on a...
We haven't actually officially appointed working groups yet. So
I know, I'm just saying. I'm saying that...
If they were to have more than the
number.
Yeah, that could be... There were no, this is where I was saying, the GSA has rules, but they don't address a number of little subtopics. This is one subtopic that the GS rules don't address.
Oh, okay, good.
Someone was asking me this the other day, and I'm also not aware of any case law on it, because there isn't a ton of court litigation. But my recommendation, just to err on the side of caution, is that the working groups should try to keep them under a quorum.
Right. Okay.
That's better. Now, sometimes working groups have like ex officio members, so, maybe Deborah wants to just hear what's going on in the working groups, not really vote, but just, attend. Or any of you can attend the working groups, and listen, but when I say active membership, which is, I think, what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
The voting membership, we typically try to keep that under a quorum.
Okay, good.
Just
that
for
was
caution's sake.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks.
So let me just mention one other thing that I think doesn't necessarily apply here. Typically, we advise working groups, in fact, is not to conduct their own surveys. Because we view surveys as being an operational act that should be done by the agency. And the second problem with surveys, even if they could be done by advisory committees, which is extremely questionable, would be that surveys, for the most part, trigger the Paperwork Reduction Act, because an advisory committee survey would typically be deemed to be sponsored by the agency, and Paperwork Reduction Act needs, I'm not an expert in this, but I think normally to get clearance to do a survey, whoever does it, 6 months. So, yeah, it's pretty cumbersome, and it takes even longer to get clearance at the end of administrations because people are rushing to get things in before before administrations change. So it could take longer than 6 months. So if there are things that you feel that you're giving advice on, but it might be useful to get more information, check with Scott. We have other ways of trying to get information that's not survey form. Sometimes one can put out a public notice asking for public comment on stuff, and then it's public, and we can share it with your working groups or with the full FAC. It wouldn't be done as a survey, just more like a notice and comment, and that's sometimes a nice way of getting information without triggering in any way the Paperwork Reduction Act or being like a formal survey. Just a good way to get additional data that you might need. So if you do run into that, please let Scott know, and we can talk to him about sort of practical ways and lawful ways of proceeding. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I'm sorry, Alex, you had
One quick question.
one quick question.
Thanks for the explanation. This is Alex Reynolds from CEA. Thanks for the explanation about surveys. One other thing is that I think today or yesterday the FCC released a public notice on exemption from the ex parte rules for Disability Advisory Committee members. Is that something that would need to be extended to the Consumer Advisory Committee if we're talking about topics that still have open proceedings in the working groups or at the full committee?
Good point. Unless exempted, our ex parte rules of the agency there's a lot of discussion about this in the past, but they do apply. We've had a ruling by ROGC. They would apply to discussions in the context of working group meetings or full committee meetings if you are substantively addressing matters in NPRMs that are pending before the agency. So if it turns out as you work through your agenda that you're going to be touching on things that are the topic of open proceedings, we could issue a public notice basically exempting your working group meeting, those conversations from the ex parte rules, but explaining that if we heard the discussions, if the relevant staff have heard the discussions, before that information would be relied upon, it would then be put in the record of that proceeding.
And, Counselor?
Thank you.
I have a draft coming to you that will just do that.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, we do that routinely just to keep everything kosher.
Okay.
Okay? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Paula.
Hope it goes well.
Oh, thank you.
Jerusha.
Thank you, Jerusha.
Yeah, so sorry, Jerusha. Yes, we have changed our time, and now we're...
Yeah.
So, do you want to sit here by the...
Whichever computer.
So you can see the computer.
Okay. Take this mic.
Here, I've got a mic right here to pass her. Scott, do you want to take... pass
That was
one?
the only question, but there wasn't a mic here.
Right there.
Oops, watch your coke.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to pour the Coke into my computer or a federal computer.
That'd be bad. So good afternoon, everyone.
I'm Jerusha Burnett. I'm an attorney in the Consumer Policy Division of CGB, and I've been asked to talk to you a little bit about the open internet transparency requirements and the form and format that the CAC is being asked to develop and propose. So we'll get started here. So first, just a really quick overview. Don't want to go into too much detail in history. You've all been there for a lot of it. So in 2010, the Open Internet Order was adopted, and that included the original transparency rule. The transparency rule was further clarified in 2011 and 2014 through advisory guidance. And then in the Verizon versus FCC case, when the order was mostly overturned, the transparency rule was upheld. So the 2010 transparency rule remains in effect today. In 2014, the Commission released an NPRM, and among many other questions asked about changes to the transparency rule moving forward. So when that NPRM moved to the 2015 order, it reclassified broadband internet access service as Title II, as you all know, and adopted some bright line and conduct rules. These include a no blocking, a no throttling, and a no paid prioritization rule. All of these rules became effective as of today. They also interpreted the existing transparency rule to require certain enhanced disclosures. And these enhancements all become effective upon approval by OMB of the Paperwork Reduction Act paperwork that we were just talking about in a different context. So specifically, we're asking the CAC to look at the safe harbor that the order creates for the form and format of disclosures intended for consumers. The disclosures under the 2015 order are intended for both consumers and edge providers such as, say, Netflix or Hulu or Facebook. So this specified format is to be recommended by the CAC, and any disclosures that follow, any providers that follow those requirements under that you recommend, if the bureaus adopt it, it'll serve as a safe harbor just for the form and format. And also, just as a note, an exemption for some of the transparency enhancements currently exists. This exemption is for providers with fewer than 100,000 subscribers, and it may be made permanent or may terminate by December 15th, 2015. That is still an open question. So the purposes of the transparency rule, as I noted before, it's intended for both edge providers and end users. So for end users, the goal is to allow them to make informed choices about their broadband services, whether they're purchasing them or using them. This is the main goal of the disclosure format we're asking the CAC to develop. In addition, it's intended to provide edge providers with information to develop new content, new applications, new services, et cetera, so that we can continue the innovation we've seen on the internet in the past. So just a quick rundown of what the requirements are for disclosure under the 2015 order. There's three main categories. First, commercial terms. Second, performance characteristics. And third, network practices. Now, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail right now on what each individual thing is. I'll give you the quick list that's here. But if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask about what is specifically required under each of these. So commercial terms, there are required price disclosures and other fee disclosures, requirements to disclose data caps and allowances, privacy policies, and redress options. For example, the phone number for a consumer to call if they're having issues. For performance characteristic, there are required disclosures of actual network performance and the impact of what we call non-broadband internet access service data services, which are used to be called specialized services. And then for network practices, it's congestion management policies, user-based practices, application-specific behavior, device attachment rules, and security policies. Again, as I said, at the end, if you have questions about any of these, please do feel free to ask. I'm not going into a ton of detail here for that. So then we have the safe harbor, which is what I was mentioning earlier. And the safe harbor is, as I said, the form and nature. It's not about the content necessarily, though which disclosures are included in that format are something that the CAC has the power to make a recommendation on. So not every single disclosure I listed on that previous slide has to be on the format you propose. Providers will make all of those disclosures, and they'll be required to make all of those disclosures. But if you find that it would not be beneficial or would be confusing to consumers, it can be left off of the disclosure intended for those consumers, and they just have to make it, in a means for edge providers to get that information. This final format is voluntary. It's a safe harbor, so it's not a requirement. They don't have to. Not every provider has to say, yes, I'll use this format. If they use that format, however, they will presume to be in compliance with the requirement to make those disclosures in a format that meets the needs of consumers. So if they choose to not follow it and just make all of their disclosures, say, on one page, just a big list, the provider could then be required to explain, if challenged, how that is useful to consumers, whether it's misleading. Maybe the consumer is saying, I don't understand a lot of the material on this form. So what we need from all of you is to determine which of those disclosures listed in the 2015 Open Internet Order will help end user consumers to make informed choices about broadband services. Again, that need not include all disclosures. You can exclude disclosures that are confusing or are intended more for you feel are intended more for edge providers, not to consumers. For example, some providers have different redress options for consumers and edge providers. Maybe you only want the consumer format to include the redress options intended explicitly for consumers. You should also determine the format. So some possible formats include a label, such as a nutrition label or a car window sticker, a table, an outline, or just about anything else you can come up with. Some of you, or all of you, I'm not sure, Scott, have received copies of some past proposed labels or things discussing what might be included on these. So you can always take a look at those for ideas of where to start. So what should you think about in developing this format? First, the format will be used on provider websites and at point of sale. That is required in the order. These disclosures must be made on websites and at point of sale. It may also be used in marketing materials. Perhaps a label is something that we really, that the provider might want to include on a marketing material, make it really easy and quick. But that is not required. You can do different disclosure formats for fixed and mobile providers, and you should consider whether or not there are reasons for a mobile provider to have different formats. For example, one requirement in the disclosures is for disclosures of actual network performance. And mobile providers under that will have to make separate disclosures for what performance is like under 3G or 4G or LTE. That's going to be more information, sort of by its very nature, than a fixed broadband provider who's going to have one speed at each service tier. So maybe that might make it a reason to have a separate format. Or maybe you think all of that can fit in one format. We want it to be as close to compare as possible. Either one is fine, but you should consider this. It should be really easy to read, and we want consumers to easily be able to compare the services. So ideally, you can look at one provider's disclosure and another provider's disclosure side by side and determine which service is best for that consumer. And very importantly, it must be accessible to persons with disabilities. That is a requirement in the order, and it's a very important one. So that is something that must be considered in developing this format. So what's the timeline for this work? Well, you need to submit a proposed disclosure format to the Commission no later than October 31st, 2015. At that time, the bureaus will review that format, and we may ask for some changes. There's not a set timeline for the bureaus to get back, but we understand that you have set meetings. So you have to get a revised proposal to us within 90 days of the bureau's request. So if you're concerned about that timeline, obviously work with Scott and the Commission to make sure that we're getting you the proposal, our concerns, in a timely manner, so you can get us a response in a timely manner. So are there any questions regarding any of this at all?
Okay, Ken?
Sorry. Sort of a two-part question. So I understand in terms of the access issues. there is nothing, as far as I remember, about in languages other than English. Is that something that the CAC can make a recommendation for?
Yes, that is certainly something you can consider and make a recommendation on.
And then the second question is, so just to clarify, certainly I can see having a consistent format would make it easy to compare between one provider and the other. But it sounds as if there's going to be for the safe harbor, no set requirements in terms of how the language that should be contained in the format. So it could just be gibberish. And would that satisfy the safe harbor? I mean, I guess that's my concern. I mean, in terms of certainly the food label, things are described in the same way. The Sumer box, things are described in the same way. Is that something that the Commission is also looking for here, or is the emphasis very much just on the format?
So my understanding is that it's form and format, so that can include the kind of language and how it's handled. So it's not just necessarily the exact layout. It can include, maybe you want to require a plain English definition of some of these terms. Mm-hmm. That I think would be perfectly acceptable.
Good.
Chris.
Can the CAC provide guidance on where the forms should be placed? In other words, can it require they all be centered on the FCC's website or some central location that allows consumers to compare across different, or across different companies or services?
So that is not explicitly in the order, but I'm sure, like if you wanted to recommend to the FCC that we make a central repository of that, I think that would be something that you could recommend. It would probably not be part of the safe harbor, however, but it could be something that I'm sure that we would welcome considering. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerusha. Thank you very much. This is a perfect time. We're stepping into getting ready for our breakout sessions, but now that Jerusha has offered us a review, I want to just talk for a moment about the process that has been underway for the consumer disclosure. The task force that has been set up, and I think you all did receive the initial email about it and subsequent email about the Consumer Disclosure Task Force that has been set up with this requirement that we get started on this and have something to the Commission by October 31st. So we have a task force. There are, I believe, 10 members of the CAC. Given the language of the order that it be a mix, a representation of stakeholders, we tried to do that, to replicate that on this task force and have a diversity of voices on the task force. So obviously we were unable to have everybody on the task force, but what we have done, we have 10 members, but every meeting that we have is open to anyone on the CAC. And as I mentioned before, we will make sure going forward that all those meetings are noticed. They all have conference call capability so that you all can participate in those discussions. So we've had 2 meetings, and after the initial meeting, the initial meeting was a discussion. We had Jerusha come and do exactly what you heard here today. She did at the initial meeting so that we could hear about what exactly was our charge, and had an initial discussion about what we wanted to start off doing. The task force members went off to try and collect some research and information about what was available on the topic, and so a number of members of the task force did just that and came back and presented that information. There are some links to that information that we would be pleased to share with everybody. some research, et cetera, academic research, company information that would help inform us as we start our work. And then we started at our second meeting that was just held a few days ago. We started to have a discussion about the big question, which is what information is important for consumers to have to know about their broadband service. So that's the discussion we just started, and that's a discussion that we will continue to have. And then obviously the next step will be how much information can we actually include, what is most important, and what format should that take. So that's the steps that we will be undertaking in the next couple of months. The next step will be that after the task force has done its work and drafted something, that recommendation will go to the appropriate working groups. Whatever working groups will be there and fit into the topic that this addresses. So this will go before the working groups. The working groups will take a look at the task force recommendations, make any tweaks, approve it, and then we will bring it before the CAC at our next meeting. We do have a meeting date for our next meeting, which is September 25th. And so our plan is to get this all done, not October 31st, but at the end of September. And if we find September 25th that there's a little bit more that needs to be done, we have some wiggle room there to do just that if there's any more work that needs to be done. But hopefully we will have a product by the end of September. So that's the plan. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, great. All right, back to the working groups. So we're only now, look, Scott, we're only about 10 minutes, 15 minutes off schedule.
How you do it, Madam Chair?
Well, yeah, we are 15 minutes off schedule, but we're almost there. And we still have this hanging broadband question, and we didn't finish that discussion. Thanks, Ken, for the question about the quorum. Yeah, we have a broadband group. It is larger than it should be. And maybe another group is too, but I think that one's a little bit closer to our number. We still don't know quite what to do with this broadband working group. I think one thing we can do is let you meet for a half hour and see if you as the 25 in that working group, which is too many. So some of you will have to say, you know what, these issues are probably not what I thought it was going to be. I think as a working group, what I want you to do is in the next half hour for you all to meet, those of you who signed up for broadband. Also the media group is going to meet at the same time. But for those of you who signed up for broadband and are not attending media, to sit down and say, okay, what are the issues that really don't apply to the specifics of the other working groups that we would want to address? Is that enough for a vibrant working group? And if we're not addressing those other issues, is that of interest to me? So think about that. That's your assignment for the next half hour, and then after all the working group sessions, we'll come back and talk at that time, and we'll see what we do about this broadband question. Okay, so Scott, you're going to help me out because we have the logistics here for the working groups.
Do I have a microphone?
Yeah, right to your right.
Right.
Sorry. A little closer to your hand. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Over the Coke can?
Over the Coke can.
I won't bore you. I almost destroyed federal property my first week here. I tripped over a phone cord, and I thought I was going to go to jail for sure and ruin my federal career. So ever since then, I don't want to dump Coke into a federal computer.
Were you the property or was the phone?
Well, who knows? We're passing around a sheet that has the 6 working groups that we emailed out to you and that you expressed your preferences about.
We're going to have to change times just a little
We'll
bit.
have to change times a little bit.
Yeah.
But approximately, 25, 30 minutes each. Session 1 starts out with broadband and media.
Yep.
And session 2, help me here, I don't have it in front of me.
Sure. Session 2 is IP transition and a consumer group.
Okay, and we have room locations, and Brittany and I will show you to those rooms. They're pretty close by here. And that session would go from
About 2:20 to 10 minutes to 3.
Okay. And then the third group?
The third group is universal service and privacy. And that will go from, what did I just say? 10 minutes of 3 to 3:20.
15, yeah, or 3:20.
Yeah, 3:20. That gets
Yep.
us almost right exactly on schedule.
And then we'll come back and talk further. And I believe it's Debbie's intention then, in very short order, then to make working group assignments and also talk to people about leadership. If someone in each one of these groups could take notes, that would be helpful about any issues that do pop up in the discussions that you have, so that we can report those back to the plenary body in short order when we return.
I will come to each one of the groups, and I will quickly assign a facilitator, and we'll get a volunteer note taker for each group. So that will happen in the first 2 minutes of your group, so that you can be efficient in your discussion.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
So you see the room. The broadband group is going to stay right here.
Yep.
So that will make things easier. And then, and these are not being recorded.
Right. Working group meetings are not public.
And if anybody did not sign the sign-in sheet,
We need you to do that, too.
we need you to do that. That'll be right up here.
Yes.
Please do that so we have a record of who is here.
Anything
Okay.
on the phone that we need to check in with?
So media, you're
This is
going,
Missy. I just wanted to ask, so, and I had talked a little bit with Hannah and Rick, do we call into those rooms for those groups, or
We
how does
will
it
have
work?
to call you, Mitzi, if you tell us which one of the
I think
groups
she's going to media.
you'd like to participate or in this afternoon. We'll call out to you.
Yeah. So
Okay.
which one are you going to start with, Mitzi?
I'm going to start with the broadband.
Okay, so you just stay on the line because broadband's meeting right here.
Yeah, right, exactly. You're already
Okay,
telling
and then on because I don't have the list in front of me, between the IP transition and the consumer group,
Yes. Yes, IP transition
Or consumer.
and consumers in the next block.
okay, is consumer going to be in this same room?
No.
No.
Okay.
Are you
Is there
interested in
someone on there?
consumer?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And the third block is universal service or
privacy.
privacy.
Universal service.
Okay. And just a moment. Okay, universal service. All right, let's see, what's your phone? Well, if you don't want to give me your phone number in this entire public setting, you may call me at 202-744-4661. And if anybody's listening to this on the internet, I will definitely put the cell phone on the national do not call list. I think it's there already, but just in case.
Oh, dear.
I want quiet tonight.
And also just to mention that probably for the second and third groups, if you're having good discussions, you can probably continue into the third session.
Yeah.
There's no reason to cut off at your half hour. Just because there's a third session starting doesn't mean you
Right.
have to stop your discussion.
Right. It'll be a little more difficult for the facilitators to move on
Yeah.
to another group,
Right.
but otherwise,
Yep.
any questions? Okay.
Oh, we have one question. Yes.
I deny it categorically. No, well, go ahead. What's the question?
Just wanted to find out, what is a quorum? Half of the group?
It's 50% plus one,
Okay,
and we have a membership of 37.
thanks.
So it's 19. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we really only have one that's over quorum.
Yeah, that's
there's only
broadband,
one.
25.
It's only broadband. The other one is right at quorum. That's quorum. It's plus one. Which
Right.
which will always happen.
Which will always happen.
Always
yeah.
happen. Okay,
All right.
let's go.
I'm sorry. Broadband and
Broadband's in the
media
room.
will stay
Just for
here.
that, Ken, you're the recorder.
Right.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, and very good, great sessions of the working groups. Thank you for making do with the amount of time you got. I know it was not nearly enough time, but thank you for using it efficiently. And we will start with working group reports. As soon as we finish that, we'll have public comments, and then we'll finish up with our final remarks for the day, and hopefully we'll meet our 4 o'clock adjournment, but that's a lot to do. So let's go right to the working group reports. We're going to start with broadband, and Amina and Alex are going to jointly tell us what you did, and if you could, with just a few minutes, give us a sense of what your working group discussed.
Sure. So we first discussed whether or not broadband had a reason to exist as a working group. I think we determined that there were a number of issues unrelated to IP transition, unrelated to USF, that could sit under the catch-all of broadband. Also, we identified the fact that, we can't see into the future quite yet, and we might want to have the convenience of the broadband catch-all for potential issues that might come up over the course of this year's CAC. Alex, do you want to go ahead and list the issues we were considering?
They were broadband competition, implementation of the Open Internet Order, so issues, sort of ongoing issues in implementation of Open Internet Order, broadband complaints, and where those complaints might be dispatched, over-the-top video, IP generally, apart from an IP transition, although there wasn't a whole lot of more granular discussion on that. Broadband deployment generally, and how that compares with adoption rates as a sub-issue. Consumer education on basically how to use the internet, how to get people who are not normally online, data caps, and municipal broadband.
Great. So I think that's sort of the short of our content of the working group, and then we did have a suggestion that once we get a sense of how many people would like to stay on the broadband working group, we can make a determination if we need to have ex officio members, so we can kind of get down to the magic number of, I'm looking across the table at
19, I think.
19. Okay.
19, right. That's the magic number.
Great.
So what we decided to do with the broadband working group is there seem to be some issues. So what we're going to do is, Scott, I don't think you were in the room, but what we're going to do is we're going to resend a list to asking for volunteers for the broadband working group, and you have heard what the issues are. So now you get a sense of what the issues are. You might say, well, I may not want to work on that working group anymore. I've got enough working groups, and probably if you signed up for 3 or more, definitely more than 3, that's too many, you might want to say broadband doesn't need to be one of them. So we're going to resend the list and sign up for broadband if you're still interested, and we'll see if we can get to that magic number of 19. Okay. Thank you, Broadband Working Group. Amina, do you want to go next with I want to make sure that you're out the door for your meeting. So you want to go next with Universal Service?
Sure.
And who is your reporter?
Todd O'Boyle.
Okay, so the two of you want a team on reporting?
Sure. So the Universal Service Working Group discussed issues that we thought would be salient for the next public meeting of the CAC. So the primary issue that we discussed was Lifeline, and then we had a number of requests for briefing that we would like to have for the full CAC meeting from the FCC, as well as potentially for the working group phone calls. I'll let Todd list out what we discussed.
We asked for a briefing on implementation of E-rate. There's also going to be a member briefing on tribal E-rate affairs. And we wanted to hear more about accessibility in Lifeline as it pertains to things like video phone and accessibility technologies. Also a couple of updates on things like the ICS proceeding, what's sort of going on there.
Yeah, Amina.
Yeah, so that sort of covered sort of initially what we were planning to do. Obviously very focused on sort of straight USF issues between now and September, mainly focused on Lifeline.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go back in order to media. Barry, I know you were... you need a mic, and then you need to raise your hand. Oh, I'm sorry, you said it was Ed? Ed's going to do reporting. Okay, thanks.
So we covered a number of areas that might be of interest coming up. We talked about ownership as an issue and diversity in ownership, sponsor identification and advertising, issues related to the reverse incentive auction that's upcoming, retransmission consent issues, the FM radio chip in cell phones as a possible issue, sales agreements, device box rentals and equipment supply, AM radio revitalization, appropriate targeting issues as it pertains to accessibility and the disability community, and just kind of general overall consolidation in media ownership and media networks and how that affects access and those sorts of things. So I think I covered everything up.
Joint sales, things like that. But yeah, Ed's did a good job of laying out what's like a pretty full agenda, which of course could be an agenda expanded depending on what comes up.
Great, thank you. Okay, IP transition working group. And let's see, Steve? Yeah.
Right, yeah, so Steve with ACI. Barry, you want me to just cover it? I think we both took notes, but...
One thing. We started out, and just for background, expressed what we had done the last term. The recommendations we had on several different issues, which all seem to be valid points for consideration. Also focused a lot on power, and then our continuation of discussion was on new issues, and that's where, Steve, if you want to just run that down, that'd be great.
Right. So, yeah, jumping off of the last year's issues on power and equipment compatibility, a number of things came up. One was, well, what's going on in the trials in Florida and Carbon Hills? So we're probably going to be looking for some sort of an update on that issue going forward. Another issue came up was the lack of data collection, and do we need some sort of quality of service measurements like an ARMIS type reporting going forward? What would that consist of? Would it look at voice, outages, repairs, repeats, answering, length of time, such, so that was one issue that was raised. Another one that was raised had to do with rural areas that lose their wireline service and they get a supposedly comparably equivalent service that's wireless. The question was, well, what happens to the data caps on those? Are they waived? And so that was an issue raised. Another one had to do with 911. On 911, we have an issue where a lot of the existing equipment out there are analog equipment. And so the question then came up is, well, how are those upgrades going to take place and how are they funded? And so that was another issue. And from that, one of the things we're going to try to get is a presentation or more information on that before going forward. Another issue that came up was that the FCC might be dealing with some IP issues in a July vote. So we may want to get a briefing on what's going to happen on that. And then the last issue that I have is trying to come up with maybe or entertain the idea of a standard of judgment, try to put together standards that actually look at, well, we have a lot of proposals. In the end, we need some consideration of were consumers actually better off as a result of this versus how do we know that under the new IP regime versus what we have under the previous TDM type network. And that's what I have as the highlights. Did I get them?
Yeah. Just one tiny addition. Steve mentioned, of course, that every working group will try to arrange where needed experts, people on the FCC staff, other outsiders to present to the plenary meetings of the CAC. But during the last term, when Steve and I co-chaired IP Transition, several times we arranged for conference calls that would take place among the members of our working group, so we'd learn a whole lot more and be able to put together these recommendations in a more coherent and knowledgeable way. So that's we've got about 3.5 months between now and the next plenary CAC, and so I think it's important that all of our working groups consider having periodic conference calls so that when September 25th rolls around, we'll be ready to actually contribute more meaningfully.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see. IP transition, who is the companion? Consumer? Yes, consumer working group. Was that Ed again, right?
We had a number of issues come up. One thing that kind of remains as a hanging fire from the last CAC is the complaint process. It has been changed dramatically since we were last together. I think there's interest in making sure that we review that thoroughly, review the outcomes and the way things are being handled, and possibly look to give further feedback on that. There was a lot of emphasis on the need and the importance of consumer education. So not just protection, but also education across the board, whether that goes to digital literacy, making sure it's available in multiple languages, and all the other relevant issues that apply to the Commission's ability to educate and inform consumers. Bill shock was mentioned as a possible issue. Prison phone calls came up. The Open Internet Order mentions that there would be an ombudsman position created, and we were interested in finding out where that would be housed within the Commission, how that fits into the existing complaint structure, and what the Commission envisions that individual doing. We also talked a little bit about reporting back on status of former recommendation or past recommendations from the Commission as something of interest. And I'm not sure if that's something that we would want to formalize into a recommendation or kind of just press for a little more strongly in terms of feedback. Another possible topic is the website and the relaunch of the ECSF system so that consumer engagement is more approachable and accessible, and what that might look like in the future moving forward.
Great, thank you, Ed. Okay, privacy group. Laura?
Hi, thank you. So, I don't know, Alex, do you want to list the? We started by just kind of listing some of the issues that the privacy working group might consider, at least those that we can think of right now at the very beginning of the term. So, Alex, if you want to go ahead and list the issues that we discussed.
Sure. So, quickly, the application of Section 222, so CP&I rules. And potentially the application of Title II generally to broadband. Privacy under the E911 location accuracy rules. Issues related to Stingray and collaboration with CISRIC on that issue. Cable and satellite privacy, given that those statutes have segments that deal with privacy but no implementing rules. Collaboration between working groups related to the questions that consumers would be asked as part of the I guess, privacy or security dashboard on a phone or mobile device, or devices generally. Consumer education around privacy. De-identification, specifically related to the petition filed in 2013, which is currently an open docket. Allocating responsibility between the FTC and the FCC, so kind of investigating the division of labor between the two agencies, and deep packet inspection as it relates to the open internet order.
Great, thanks. And then the next steps that we identified were to come up with a brief synopsis of each of these issues, just for our reference, to use as an internal reference document moving forward. And then maybe in our first meeting of the full working group, we could discuss the synopses that we've come up with and try to identify some priorities to begin with.
Excellent. Great work, guys. Does anyone have a question of any of the working groups, very quickly? Okay. So this is a great list of issues. I heard a lot of different issues and some suggestions also for briefings and presentations. So I just want to go back very quickly. Barry brought up the sort of the process point about having conference calls, which absolutely is how you're going to accomplish all this. We have a meeting in September, so there are several months now between our two meetings, and that's the time for working groups to go forward and start to discuss these issues, take charge, get some work done, take action. So I just want to go back to 9:30, 9:40, 9:45 this morning, when Chairman Wheeler was here and he was talking, and here's what he said. He said, produce actionable results. And he said he was looking forward to our products. So what does that mean? It means that we need to have products. That is what we are here to do. It's great to educate ourselves, to inform ourselves, to talk amongst ourselves, but really at some point we want to produce something. And that's how the Commission will find our work valuable. Having an educated CAC, an informed CAC, just goes so far. So that's my little 2 cents, my little pep talk. You'll hear from me again if we get to September 25th, and you all have nice reports about how you heard from all these experts, and that's what you report. So, the idea is to produce some recommendations. Obviously, you need to think through what's valuable for consumers, but that is what we want to try and do as a CAC, is to be of value to the Commission, which means we have to provide something for them. And I think that was behind what the chairman was saying as well to us. So there you have it. Thank you all for your discussion, for your ideas, and it sounds like you're off to a fabulous start and thanks so much. Our next step is that Scott and I, once we get all the appointments made to the working groups themselves, we will then assign chairs, and you will then, with your chairs, get your conference call set up and go to it. And I look forward. I'm ex officio on all of these. I try to participate on some, obviously, as much as I can. So I look forward to some of your discussions moving forward. So thanks so much. Okay, next on the agenda is that it is time for our comments from the public, which is an opportunity for anyone to come to the CAC meeting and offer a public comment. So I will initially ask if there's anyone here who wants to speak to the CAC. Okay. I have actually a comment that was received, that Scott received, that I will speak on behalf of. We received a comment and a complaint, so I will just read the gist of what this comment was about. The committee has received a comment and complaint alleging that a wireless carrier makes it difficult to connect third-party devices to its network. The CAC does not address individual complaints and would prefer that the complaint process already underway continue to resolution. If the problem is systemic, as alleged by the commenter, the CAC may wish to consider this issue at a later date. So that is a comment and response. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, our future meeting date, our next date is September 25th. And do we have any other looking ahead? We will likely have a third meeting, right, Scott, before the end of the year, possibly sometime in early December. First, second week, not too late, obviously. We don't want to hit too close to the holidays, but we will work on that.
Friday. We're having Friday.
And it may not be, it may not be a Friday. So look for a announcement about a date in December. Does anyone have any final points or comments? Yes, Jeff.
I don't want to complicate things more, and I hope it's not, but it actually might be really helpful, in addition to just sending around the reiterating the question about whether people still want to be in the broadband group, having heard everything that everyone else, some more definition to the other groups, and also in terms of evaluating whether one wants to be in the broadband group relative to other groups. Could we actually just essentially redo that process and just could you ask everyone whether they indeed want to stick in the groups they had identified before, or perhaps might want to change that around? My guess is that there will be general consistency, but I heard things coming out of other groups that I didn't really understand that was what that group was about, and I might prefer to be there instead of broadband or something like that. So
fair enough.
That makes sense for how to do that?
That's fine. We'd be, I think, Scott, you agree? I think we'd be happy to do that. What we can do is resend the request, and if you don't mind, if you could agree to all do that by this Friday, so we don't hold up the start of the working groups.
And if you could, I've been taking notes on the report backs, but if the reporters could email me their list, that would greatly simplify and make sure that I didn't miss anything in my note taking on the issues that you identified for each group.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Jeff, and I would just repeat that I think 3 is really the max number that someone should sign up for. You can always jump on a call or two of a working group, but I think to be an ongoing participant in more than 3 groups is probably taking on too much. So, if you're from a large organization and you have colleagues, I think 3 groups is fine, or, if you really want to be devoted, 3 groups is fine. But I think going beyond 3 working groups is probably going to be too much.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, absolutely.
One other thing we haven't mentioned about how the working groups operate today is that the leaders of working groups meet with Debbie and me via conference call prior to each plenary meeting as well, because we definitely want your input, ideas on speakers and your contacts about speakers, but also we want to make sure that all the working groups are cross-fertilizing with each other.
Yeah.
So that we don't have silos, so that we all know what each other are up to and when there needs to be a collaboration on something. So we try to do that regularly, at least one time a quarter.
Yeah. Yes, if not more. So that is part of the coordination process to exchange information. Right. So we are at the end of our day. So we could do this, Robert's Rules. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? Christina, thank you.
Second.
I hear a second.
There you go.
All in favor of adjournment? Say aye. We so moved, and
Thank
we
you,
are
everybody.
adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.